Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call to order this meeting of the Arlington ISD Board of Trustees on March the 11th, 2021 at 5 p.m. Due to health and safety concerns related to the COVID-19 coronavirus, this meeting will be conducted by video conference or telephone call. At least a quorum of the board will be participating in person by video conference or telephone conference in accordance with the provisions of Section 551.125 or 551.127 of the Texas Government Code that have been suspended by order of the governor. All or some trustees and limited staff may be together while maintaining proper social distancing at room 301A in the McBurn Professional Development Center. Due to ongoing safety concerns, all open meeting proceedings will be live broadcast, but members of the public will be limited in the McBurn Professional Development Center pursuant to state guidelines and regulations, and all persons will be required to comply with the state and district guidelines and regulations. Members of the public may access this meeting via AISD website at www.aisd.net. The Board of Trustees on March the 11th, 2021, beginning at 5:02 p.m., will convene in closed session pursuant to sections 551.071 through 551.084 of the Texas Government Code in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act for the topics set forth on our agenda. We will reconvene in open meeting at approximately 6:15 p.m. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. At this time, we will reconvene into open session this meeting of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees for March the 11th, 2020 at 7:28 p.m. We will start our meeting with our opening ceremony. Please join Melody Fowler in leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now, if you would please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. So the first item on our agenda is our program and/or presentation. We have this evening our March Student of the Month from Martin High School. It is my honor to introduce Principal of Martin High School, Ms. Marlene Roddy, and she will give us additional information on our Martin Student of the Month.
Thank you, President Mays, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Cavazos. I'd like to recommend Grace Soontornvillawath for their High School Student of the Month for March for Martin High School. Grace is a top student. She's in the top 2% of her class, and she's number 9 in her class of 830 at Martin High School. She's a member of Martin STEM Academy, and she's a member of the National Merits National Honor Society, the Math National Honor Society, the Science National Honor Society, HOSA, and Key Club. She not only participates in these organizations, but she's won 2nd place in the Medical Innovation Competition and is certified in phlebotomy. She's currently our HOSA Vice President. She also is passionate about her love for soccer and music. She is a member of the varsity soccer team. She also plays club soccer. She says soccer is her go-to for staying healthy and mentally focused. Her soccer coach, Coach Harrington, says Grace always arrives to practice prepared to get better. She's a teammate that helps those around her reach greater heights. The Lady Warriors soccer team is stronger because Suni, her nickname, is on our roster. She is a pianist who's competed and won 7 state piano titles. She's also part of the Martin Choir. She's received a #1 rating in solo and ensemble. She has competed at the state level in piano, and she says because of that, she's learned to develop stress management and discipline. She shared with me that her instructor, Miss Shelley Fuller, helped her to rebound after her first entry. And she didn't win the first time around, but she won the next 7 times, and she's won every time she's entered since then. She has interest in science and the STEM Academy. She was influenced by her parents to apply and be a part of the STEM Academy. Her mom is a nurse and her father is an engineer. A special experience that Grace has had is that she's worked at the Texas Health Harris Methodist Hospital as a volunteer. The first summer she worked in the orthopedic wing, and the second summer she worked in the NICU. And the NICU was really cool, and she got to hold babies while she did that, and so that was really special. Those experiences have led her to think that she really does want to be a physician, and she plans to go into pre-med when she starts college. She also told me that her own doctor, Dr. Mark Jones, has influenced how she'll work with patients. And she says he relates to patients he always takes notes about their visits, and he brings up their special interest and anything that he's taken notes about at their next visit. And she says she thinks that's a great way to bond with patients, and she plans to use that same tactic when she becomes a doctor. She plans to attend Stanford University this next fall in Palo Alto, California. This will be her first time to be away from home. She's lived her whole life in Arlington, Texas. So she's very excited, but she also has a little trepidation about it. The way she plans to attack that and to get over her fears is to get involved in campus life as soon as she gets there and make as many new friends as possible. Grace is a definite risk taker who takes ownership of her learning. She seeks challenges and demonstrates a growth mindset in all facets of her life. Her academic and extracurricular accomplishments are extensive and impressive. For all of these reasons, I'm proud to introduce and recommend Grace Soon-Tornvilwath as the District March Student of the Month from Martin High School. Grace?
Great. Congratulations, Grace.
Thank you.
What accolades. I'm going to take some notes on some things that Ms. Roddy has said about you and use them in my life for overcoming things and relieving pressure and stress. And it seems like it's worked for you because you've been very successful. Very
Thank
successful. Congratulations. Would you like to introduce anyone that's standing next to you?
Yes, this is my beautiful mother, Sarah Soon-Tornvilwath, and she is a nurse, so this is where I got my medical interest from. And then this is my father, Jeff Soon-Tornvilwath, and he's an engineer, so that's where I got all of my science and STEM and math interest from.
Very good. Nice to meet you. Congratulations, parents. Once
Nice
again,
to meet
Grace, to
you.
you, congratulations. We wish you
Thank
well
you.
on your college experience. I think you'll enjoy California and playing a little soccer on the beach, keeping yourself up. Mhm. And colleagues, anything that y'all would like to say to Grace? So it's a hearty congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. Best of luck. You're going to do very well.
Thank you.
Very good, Grace. Thank you very much. Once again, congratulations. Y'all enjoy your evening and have fun for the next 6-8 weeks. You tell me how long we have left in school, you know.
Yeah, well, I think we move into September, so I got until then.
Very good, very good. Is there anything else, Grace, you would like to say before we go?
Just thank you for this incredible honor. I was absolutely blown away when Miss Roddy came and emailed me that I was Student of the Month for Martin, and then I just really can't believe it, you know.
I see where your parents got
She's
the name
very
Grace
deserving.
from. What did you say, Ms. Roddy?
I said she's very deserving.
Yes. it
And I
sounds like it.
wanted to mention that I have something that the board and Dr. Cavazos brought to the school for me to give to you when you know, the next time you can swing by my office. It's a real special little commemoration of this evening, so.
Thank you.
Yep. You can pack it in your stuff for your dorm. Once again, congratulations. Thank you so much, and y'all have a great rest of the evening.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is so exciting. Okay, for some more excitement, next on our agenda are administrative appointments. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays, I'd like to recommend the board ratify the appointment of the individuals discussed in closed session for principal for Swift Elementary, assistant principal for Berry Elementary, and assistant principals for Thornton Elementary.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the ratification?
I'll make a motion to approve ratification. I'll second.
Okay, a motion by Mrs. Fowler, a second by Ms. Walton. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Once again, since this is being conducted virtually, our vote will be a roll call vote. Please state your name and vote either yes if you agree or no if you are not in favor. Mr. Wilbanks?
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Ms. Walton?
Polly Walton, I vote yes.
Mr. Hogg?
Bowie Hogg, I vote yes.
Mrs. Fowler?
Melody Fowler, I vote yes.
Mr. Chapa?
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes. Motion passes in the affirmative. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays, I'd like to announce the principal for Swift Elementary, Mr. Carlos Lopez. Carlos attended the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center for its Bachelor of Science in Rehabilitation Counseling Psychology, American College of Education in Indiana for Master of Ed in Educational Leadership. Most recently, he is the principal at Berry Elementary, has been an assistant principal at Bowie High School, assistant principal at Thornton, has taught pre-K, second, third, and fifth grade, and has been a vocational rehabilitation counselor. Congratulations to Mr. Carlos Lopez. Next, Shaylee Tave, assistant principal at Berry Elementary, attended the University of Texas at Arlington for Bachelor of Science in Interdisciplinary Studies, University of Phoenix for Master of Ed in Curriculum and Instruction. Most recently, the assistant principal at Knox Elementary, and has taught third grade also at Knox. Next, the assistant principal for Berry, Manuel Triana. Manny has attended the University of Texas in San Antonio for Bachelor of Science in Mathematics, UT Arlington for Master of Ed in Educational Administration. Most recently has been the assistant principal at Roark, has been an assistant principal at Crouch, at Bowie High School, and at Lamar High School. He's also taught mathematics at the high school level. Next is Corey Kowaleski, the assistant principal at Thornton, Bachelor of Arts in Spanish, has attended Tarleton State University for Master of Ed in Ed Administration. Most recently, the assistant principal at Thornton Elementary School, has been a fifth grade math and science teacher and a third grade teacher as well. Next, the assistant principal for Thornton is Sean Raymond. Sean attended Xavier University in Louisiana for Bachelor of Arts in Education. UT Arlington for Master of Ed in Ed Leadership and Policy Studies. Most recently, the assistant principal at Berry, has been an instructional coach at Patrick Elementary, has taught 5th and 6th grade, and has also taught 8th grade, and been a team leader as well for science. Those are our most recent appointments for administrators, and I welcome them, and also this is a ratification, so they've been at work already. But congratulations to them in this appointment.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Cavazos, and yes, congratulations for those appointments. Next on our agenda would be public hearings, but tonight we have none. So we will move to our open forum for agenda items. As stated on the posted agenda, members of the public who desire to address the board regarding an item on this agenda are required to register by sending an email to the Superintendent Schools of Secretary, lbenjami@aisd.net, no later than 3 p.m. the day of the board meeting. Mrs. Benjamin, do we have any requesters registered to address the board regarding agenda items?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Okay, then we will move on in our agenda. Next on our agenda are action items. Our first action item is consider TASB Local Policy Update 116. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays. And the TASB Update 116 was brought before the board last board meeting for a discussion, has also been reviewed by our governance committee. And so this evening, we bring this item for your consideration for adoption.
Okay. Do I have any comments, questions, or motions from our trustees? Okay, Mr. Chapa.
Thank you, President Mays. This did come before the board at our last meeting. The governance committees received no requests for additional modifications or requests for information. As I said at the last meeting, this is primarily limited changes, some wordsmithing here or there, bringing some policies in line with other policies or our current practices. One notable one from sort of a parent perspective is that the district may require a physician's written request to administer non-prescription medication. This is generally in line with what we've been doing already, but is being formalized into policy. And so with that, I would move that the board adopt TASB Policy Update 116.
Very, very good. So we have a motion by Mr. Chapa. We have a second by Mr. Wilbanks. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. Mr. Wilbanks.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Ms. Walton.
Polly Walton, I vote yes.
Mr. Hogg.
Bowie Hogg, I vote yes.
Mrs. Fowler.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes.
Mr. Chapa.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes. Motion passes in the affirmative. I just want to say thank you to our Board Governance Committee, chaired by Mr. Chapa. Also on that committee is Ms. Polly Walton and Dr. Reich. Okay, next on our agenda are discussion action items. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. And this evening we bring, again, as we do almost every board meeting for about a year now, we bring an update on COVID and our operations of schools and things like that. And there's some important information that you're aware of that we'll recap, including the opportunity for our staff to receive a vaccination thanks to the partnership with the Arlington Fire Department, and other items that Dr. Brown will cover. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Tracy Brown to lead us through this presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos, President Mays, members of the board, and of course our superintendent. Thank you for the opportunity this evening to present a brief return to school update for you this evening. We are going to cover, as Dr. Cavazos mentioned, our COVID-19 vaccination event, which happened just this past Monday, a few days ago. We're also going to talk to you about some post-vaccine guidance as it relates to quarantine that was released by the CDC. And then we're going to end with an update on our AISD and Tarrant County COVID-19 data. So since the summer, we've started with our guiding principles. And of course, today is marks 1 year since this started. And so we continue to ask for flexibility and grace and extend that as well. We, of course, are committed to educational equity for all of our students, regardless of whether you're in person or you're learning virtually. We want to make sure that you have a rigorous learning experience. We continue to value stakeholder input as we continue to make decisions for our present and, of course, for our future, and prioritizing, as always, the health and safety of our staff members and all of our students. So our AISD vaccination event happened on March 8th, which was this past Monday. This is a nice picture with Dr. Cavazos and members of our AISD nursing team. We had, I believe, 19 nurses who volunteered to administer vaccines on Monday. So for many of our staff, it was very comforting to be vaccinated by someone they may know or from the system. And so we certainly appreciate all of them for volunteering for this effort. And this effort was a joint venture, of course, led by the Arlington Fire Department. We are very appreciative to the team. They were very supportive, hospitable, and very efficient in the work that they've done. FEMA was a great support, Arlington Police Department as well. And then from the Arlington ISD side, I mentioned the nurses, but our transportation team, they were transporting staff members from the Center for Performing and Visual Arts, the Center for Arts, to the esports stadium, and they did that efficiently, and we appreciate them as well. Our security that made sure that we were safe and we had all the resources we need to have a great event. And then just to the Arlington ISD administrative staff, with just a very short notice, we were able to make sure that this event happened smoothly and that we were able to vaccinate many of our staff members in our system. So we sent a survey out at the end of last week once we got the great news that we were able to offer this to our staff. And I believe we got about a 73% return rate on the survey. So of those who completed the survey, we had about almost 3,400 of them who registered, if you will, for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We had 1,500 who responded that they had already received the vaccine. 720 declined the offer to get vaccinated. And then we had 305 respondents who declined to answer one way or the other. And of those, as it relates to that actual vaccination day, we had 2,654 of our staff members who were vaccinated. We do realize that over the course of the weekend, many of them got a call to be vaccinated through Tarrant County or their pharmacy or other places. And so we do know that others were able to get vaccinated. We had a few that were vaccinated on Wednesday. The fire department offered if we had any who still had not had the opportunity to get vaccinated, they could go on Wednesday. And so we did have some that took us up on that offer. Another update is our Texas Department of State Health Services has now moved all of our school staff to either A1 or B1 status. And that means basically that everyone is eligible. So they can register through regular registries, through their local pharmacy, through their doctor's office either, and they're able to get on the list to be vaccinated if they chose not to go through Johnson & Johnson with us on Monday. So to provide a little bit more context to guidance for vaccinated persons, and then also what our next step is now that Governor Abbott rescinded the mask mandate. We'll start with that. So the mask mandate was actually rescinded. It went into effect yesterday, and Dr. Cavazos has shared communication with our staff and our families that we continue to our return to school plan update, our return to school plan as we've done since the beginning of the year. So our students who are in grades 1 through 12 will continue to wear a mask inside the school and in any school-related activities in Arlington. Our pre-K and kinders, again, we can continue to strongly urge our pre-K and kinders to continue to wear their mask as well. And we, again, because safety is a priority, will continue our health screening, our temperature checks. We'll continue to make sure that our folks are hand sanitizing and that we're providing social and physical distancing when possible in our classrooms. So the update to the CDC quarantine guidance, which does impact the workforce actually in a positive way. So people who tested positive during the last 90 days, or they have been fully vaccinated in the last 90 days, and if they're a contact of someone, they are not required to quarantine unless they are symptomatic. So that is an adjustment, and that is new post-vaccination. Now it's just 90 days. However, it's possible that can be extended as we continue to learn more about the vaccines and get to know more about its effect. It could extend beyond the 90 days, and we'll continue to keep you updated as we get new information. So we'll talk about COVID-19 data. So the Tarrant County metrics for safer in-person instruction. Just to review these, we seek to have a 7-day moving average of less than 10%, ideally less than 5%, no more than 2,000 cases per week as part of the metric, and then at least 4 weeks of data showing stable or declining case counts. We'd like for that COVID-like illness number to be trending lower in the last 2 weeks, and hospital beds occupied by COVID patients to be below 10%. So what we can show and share with you today, of course, we continue to see a positive light in this process. And so our 7-day moving average as of March 7th was 8%. Virus spread is over 2,000 cases. It's at 3,057 as of March 6th. Our 7-day moving COVID-like illness data is at 2%. And then the percentage of hospital beds occupied by COVID patients is holding at 6%. Of course, that's just the arrows show you that we're trending downward in all of those categories. As it relates to our AISD COVID data, we know that when we were closed during the snowstorm for that a little bit over a week, it did impact our self-reporting numbers and our cases, but we wanted to share that with you, what we have the data so far. As it relates to self-reporting cases by the month February, we only had 524, and you can see that's a sharp decline from January. We also know that there was quite a bit of time that we were not in session, if you will. As of March, just the beginning of March, we've had 99 self-reports that have come in, and just a reminder, that could be a close contact of a positive person. It could be that this person tested positive, or it could be that they had experienced COVID-like symptoms. Our dashboards continue to be updated on Tuesdays. This is our most recent dashboard a couple of days ago. 3 active staff cases with 38 in quarantine, 33 students with 200 in quarantine as of a couple of days ago. We are continuing our AISD COVID rapid testing. And so just to share some data with you, February 24th through the 26th, tested 27 students and or staff members. We had none that tested positive. March 1st through 5th, last week, we tested 61. We had 1 positive case. And so far, March 9th and 10th, tested 14, and we have no positive cases reported from our rapid testing center. And that's all I have to cover for you in our return to school update. And we're happy to take questions from you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown. Colleagues, anybody have a question and or comments? Yes, Ms. Walton?
Thank you, President Mays. I just wanted to tell my fellow board members and folks out there, I was out at the Esports Stadium for the vaccinations on Monday. It was phenomenal. It was just worked like a fine-tuned watch. Wonderful people, everybody excited. It was sort of like the first day of school. We all kind of felt like there's hope, and there is. This is really a game changer for getting us back to our classrooms. And I know there are a lot of teachers and staff members that are excited about that. So thank you to everyone, fire department, police department. There were also people there working from the libraries and from the Arlington libraries and from code enforcement. There was one guy that was taking down the information from code enforcement. So it was a very citywide operation and school district operation. And it amazing how we all, everyone came together and did a great job. I know Dr. Brown was out there too, and greeting people as they came in for their vaccinations, and with Dr. Cavazos, it was really wonderful. Thank you again to everyone who made this happen.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Any other trustees? Yes, Mr. Hogg.
Thank you. I move this. Thank you, President Mays. Ms. Walton, I agree. For us to reopen schools, we knew we had to get to the vaccine day. I commend the staff and the board for the discussion, and especially Dr. Cavazos and your work with Chief Krausen and the fire department to be prepared for the day when the governor got his mind right and realized teachers had to get this. Because the goal we have to have is reopening schools, and that has to be our goal. We are here for student outcomes. That is why we are in this room and why we're doing it. So I commend so much, because so much can't be done till we get to that level of what happened on Monday and get to that. And it is, we have all known that is hopefully the key to this presentation that we have of reopening schools. This is either Ms. Brown or Dr. Cavazos. Let me just ask, as we talk about reopening schools, I don't see any, and we haven't had these stats, so I know y'all haven't put them in there, but what's the reality of reopening and how far behind our students are right now?
So I'll add some context, and then Dr. Brown can also add. But so we currently serve, obviously, as you know, Mr. Hogg, that we serve students face-to-face and we serve them at home. That's the model that we're under from Texas Education Agency. So today, as you well know, a parent can decide, I would like my instruction at home, and for safety reasons and all others. So what we do know in Arlington is that we give them a choice, because that's what TEA requires us to do, but it's also the right thing to do. And so in your point, vaccinations, and I've said this over and over, vaccinations is a big piece to that puzzle of returning at some point to normalcy. And it accelerates, in my opinion, accelerates public schools' return to some normalcy, right? Because it's a big piece of the puzzle. It doesn't solve all the problems, but it's a big one. fidelity to the protocols, Mr. Hogg, and that's why we mentioned that we're going to continue with our protocols wearing masks. Why? Because we want to sustain our schools opening, and we want to make sure that we welcome more students who would take advantage of face-to-face instruction. So to answer your question, this whole pandemic with face-to-face and virtual students, they both, in both camps, if you will, struggle. But we know that when virtual students are not successful with virtual, they're really not successful with virtual. And what we have found is that virtual students, this is not a general statement, these are some students have told us this, is that they need more accountability, more interaction, more daily, more frequent, if you will. And so we know that we all want to provide that because that's what normal, operation would be. So to answer your question, we do have a gap in not only Arlington, but I think public schools in general, and you'll see in our summer school presentation coming up later, where we're going to address through intervention, but it's going to take time, and we're years into this, filling that gap, if you will. But you'll see one big piece of it in the interventions we're going to talk about summer school. So to that point, we do know that there's greater volume now of students returning to school. That's a true thing. It's still their choice, and that's, I think, an appropriate way to operate right now. But we do begin to see some volume changing. Doesn't change completely and all this kind of stuff, but we're beginning to see that volume change.
And I'm always a fan of multiple options of choice, and parents have the choice. And so I think we can't ever forget in this discussion that parents still have the option to keep their students at home. Our teachers were not given that choice, and that's why the vaccine was so critical to get us to this discussion of where we're going. I think I saw Commissioner Morath from the Texas Education Agency was saying after last summer, they assumed Texas students were 2.5 months behind, and now they're assuming, I think he said 5 or 6 months is what, and I think that's probably a small, light estimate, but that's not an easy gap to make up. And I think, Dr. Vassos, you said it, the reality, the majority of kids learning virtually are not achieving what we would expect. And I think it's a real issue. And I say that, and I've told everyone I've known, I've been pretty vocal, we have to do anything we can to get students back in the classroom. And so I see this reopening schools presentation, and I don't see a lot of how we're reopening schools. I see a lot of reviewing, here's what it is, but I don't see how it actually gets us to that reopening and what we're doing. We got to some of the stages now. I commend, I think it's smart, like the CDC recommendations we're following of no quarantine for staff. If they've met that, if they've done their 90 days, they've gotten their vaccine, they've gone to some of these. But, let me go through a couple of things. We eliminated the daily surveys that students are doing to come in and fill out correctly. Correct.
Say one more time, Mr. Hogg, I'm sorry.
The daily.
They still do the daily health screening, and they must do the temperature checks. Those are protocols, and we know that they work, and they've mitigated the spread. So all our protocols, including wearing a mask, social distance where you can, washing your hands at the elementary level and things like that, that you purposefully do that, will continue. So the protocols continue, and again, the point to that is so that we can sustain and then welcome more students, to your point, Mr. Hogg, so that we can continue this progress, that we've made very good progress. And those protocols allow us to do even more, which is, I think, where you're going, and I can certainly address that, but allow us to do even more with face-to-face instruction for students.
And you're right, do I love these masks? No. But if the mask gets more students back in our classroom, that is what we need to do.
Correct.
So I think we then have to address on the next issue, especially from our high school level, we have hybrid, and we have many classrooms with 3 to 6 students running really low. Students still have the option of virtual. When and what are we doing to get students back into our classroom and do this? We, along with us, Graham, I think Fort Worth and Dallas are the only ones still doing hybrid. So what is the plan to get us back and get students back in our classroom from that standpoint?
So that's a great question, and that's also something that we're very purposeful of. So just to be clear, right, hybrid is they still have a choice to attend face-to-face or stay at home, high school students, just like everybody else. The hybrid, just for clarity in the discussion, the hybrid is a schedule we've developed where you cannot attend 5 days a week. You can still come to school, but not 5 days a week. So to your question is, is there any adjustment to that hybrid in the horizon? And from my perspective, and we've had some internal discussion about this, we are looking at attempting to make an adjustment to that hybrid if we can, even this school year. So I'll be more specific with that. So we know that the numbers are trending down, because we just saw that with Dr. Brown. The positivity, hospitalization, all those numbers are pointing in the right direction. We know that the big piece of the puzzle with vaccination, something that we've implemented, and staff, they're getting it in other places, and all these other things as well, that continues. It's just going to grow. We also know our protocols have worked. So, our protocols have worked very well. So as we move to evaluating, can we undo or adjust the hybrid schedule as early as this year? That's what we're evaluating. And I'll give you some kind of guideposts that will inform that evaluation. So I've already told you kind of the big guideposts that are already in motion, which is vaccination and all those. So I'll go to, well, what else? So we know that we're upon spring break. And spring break is another time where we run the risk in society, not just Arlington, we run the risk that there will be a lot of cases because of travel and just kind of gatherings and things like that. We know that happened in November, December, Memorial Day, 4th of July. We know those things, and it happened. So the spike came after those things. What we didn't have back then, Mr. Hagen, you know this, what we didn't have back then is the vaccination as a big variable to say, well, can this spike not happen even if we have an extended period of being off, if you will? So what we are looking at is after spring break, and everybody well aware of this now, the science tells us that it takes about 7 to 10 days after an event like spring break or like Thanksgiving, or pick a holiday, to where you really know the effect of, was there a spike? Or would these numbers go up? Is there a community spread that would, be disproportionate in Arlington and those sorts of things? So we will examine those numbers as we come back from spring break and give it a little bit of time, because we know that that's what has happened in other breaks that we've had, so that we make good decisions. And so there's a target of, if we can make an adjustment, could we do it for the last 6 weeks of school for hybrid? And that gives us, I think, enough of a runway to look at the numbers after spring break, to get more people vaccinated, because that's a reality too. If staff didn't take advantage of our Monday vaccination event, which we know many didn't, they can still be getting appointments, and those things are flowing a lot better now. So all those pieces will inform our target of, can we make an adjustment to hybrid as early as the last 6 weeks of school? So what would something like that potentially look like? First kind of bridges we have to cross is the data. If there is no spike and the numbers remain stable or they go down, then that's very good news for a lot of different reasons, but it's very good news. Assuming that that path continues, then we can look at, all right, what would that mean for our high schools to be able to go 5 days a week? The big clarification that I think is important as a context is, because we offer 5 days a week in high school doesn't necessarily mean the students will come from virtual to in-person. It will still be their choice, like it is in elementary and junior high. But if they would like to, then their schedule would simply be 5 days a week. And we know that it's important. There's an important factor in students being able to have continuity of instruction, frequency of instruction. But I do want to be just context, because there's a lot that goes around this topic. There was a very good reason, and we'll talk more in the summer school in another topic that I think, again, just making sure we keep the context. There's a very good reason we did hybrid. And quite frankly, it worked. And it proved to be very successful. But to your point, Mr. Hogg, there are things and variables now, thankfully, that we have that we can reevaluate. And can we have 5 days a week instruction at a high school, for example, the last 6 weeks of school, and not wait till the fall? So those are the guideposts. I think that makes sense with evaluating this, but it is current evaluation. We're actively looking at that, getting input and things like that, because we do think that if the numbers don't spike, and so I want to be careful with that, because if there's some variable to the numbers, doesn't mean it's a spike. Then I do think it can be realistic to make an adjustment for the last 6 weeks of school.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos, and I think, you know, the numbers and where they come, you know, April 13th is the last 6 weeks is when it starts.
That's correct.
I would hope we could go as fast as that, but I'm also, where's the day of when we can get it and accommodate it? And listen, some people are saying right after spring break or vaccinated. We've got a large system to make the ship to move, but I think you've got to start putting expectations on the date of when that is happening, and then you readjust, or if there is issues, because you always have to contingency plan from that standpoint. The other thing that more students back in person does, not just high school, but across the board, is it reduces, and as the percentages grow, and that's why as the percentages grow, it's potentially less teachers that are having to virtually teach also at the same time. As we've talked from the start, principals can make that decision where they can have some fully virtual, some fully in person, if their numbers work out correctly. So my question on that, you know, assuming we now have vaccination, what is the campaign that the district's doing to recruit and encourage students to come back that now staff is vaccinated, these numbers are low? What is the district going to do to promote and campaign to bring students back into the classroom face-to-face, which reduces the workload on teachers, allows that flexibility, and obviously increases learning?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And just, again, just to reiterate some of the points, to be prudent with a campaign, it is probably more prudent to make sure the numbers are holding before we start a campaign. But to your point, make this discussion public like we are tonight, that this is a real possibility. But the other thing with high schools is, for example, is we're examining whether when we make adjustments to hybrid, if that becomes a reality, then also allowing students to go off campus for lunch, for example, the ones that are eligible. Because we know that more students at the high school with the current lunch situation would be a problem in some of our high schools. So that's one variation. The other is, to your point, Mr. Hogg, is we also would aim to have students and parents make their decision for the last 6 weeks of school and kind of hold that steady so that there isn't back and forth the last weeks of school, because that can be very challenging for our high schools and all our schools, but we're just talking high school for hybrid in this case. So those are some of the ideas that we're thinking about, whether, making that, and to your point, this may not fit the exact definition of marketing, but if you have to decide for the last 6 weeks of school, then you're going to give it some thought, because that's going to be the decision of your type of instruction. I do think that we'll see some volume come back, or come to, I should say, 5 days a week. But we'll be asking them. And I can also tell you that, some of the reviews that we've done with some input is that it may not change in some areas or some schools completely their volume for the last 6 weeks of school. But all that to say that, yes, we would communicate clearly, have them sign up, have that discussion about off-campus lunch, still following our protocols in our buildings, and begin to increase the volume. I do have to put a big, and I know this is not the most positive thing in the world, the big footnote, which is many things can change between now and then, but our best planning right now is a target of, can we make the adjustment or an adjustment certainly by the last 6 weeks. If we can do it earlier, then obviously that would be good too. But to give people a guidepost of, where are these measures? And the first one is what the numbers do right after spring break. I think that is real. We have seen it. I do hope that that's not the case because we have vaccinations, and so we don't see a big spike. We don't see, a big drain in terms of hospitalizations and all that. But I can't predict that with clarity because nobody can. So those are the main guideposts. The numbers, we know the protocols work. We know that, there are more kids now with interest of coming back, which I completely respect. And we know that if we offer 5 days of school in high school, it would be beneficial to students.
And Dr. Cavazos, let me ask on, as you talk about, listen, we all know the one thing you've learned is we have to pre-plan, but it's also plan for what else could happen during this entire ordeal. So we know that is always going to be the case from where we're going. And so are y'all planning a survey for the week after spring break to how many are coming back? What's that results going to look like? And how do we plan that? Because then that gives you 17 days in essence, 17 business days, 23 or something like that, total days, but 17 business days to get, I think maybe one of those is a holiday, so 16, maybe around there, to get. So is that survey planning for the week after spring break to figure those numbers out? And then are principals going to start then calculating, could some teachers be all virtual, all in person?
Yeah, so just for clarity, we'll save high school for just a minute. All levels, pre-kinder through 8th grade, parents can make that choice today. And so if a large volume of kids come to school, then those adjustments that you just mentioned, Mr. Hogg, are very possible. And some schools are already looking at ways to do that. They've always had that autonomy, but quite frankly, just to be very clear, and we'll cover it in another presentation as well, when you have 50-50, it's not possible to have a teacher teaching virtual and a teacher teaching face-to-face. You have to have the concurrency. And we know the concurrency is the best model for the students. But we also know that when the volume increases, you can make those adjustments, which is what you're describing, Mr. Hogg. So pre-kinder through 8th, they can decide they're coming back, if you will, from virtual. Many have already. And then those adjustments can be made. Move into high school. Today, really any given day, students could say, I don't want to do virtual, I'm coming face-to-face. They would be restricted to a couple of days a week. They don't have the 5-day-a-week option because that's not our schedule. So those decisions can be made without any big restriction, if you will. So if students decide they want to stop being virtual and come, even if it's 2 days a week in high school, they can make that decision. What we would be looking at surveying, and I don't know if I'd call it a survey more than a choice, is if we start the 5 days a week at a high school, then are you going to take advantage of face-to-face? So we get numbers. And then once we get numbers, we can plan appropriately for operations such as lunch and things like that. I won't go down the whole list, but that's the big one. So after spring break, as we have a number of days, I would say 7 to 10. There don't have to be business days because that's not how it works. It's just 7 to 10 days. And we start seeing the numbers, then we can start launching a decision, if you will. Tell us what your decision is. Are you going to come 5 days a week, or are you going to stay virtually? Early recommendation, and again, this all can change, is we want to make sure you lock into that decision so that our high schools and our teachers at the high school and principals can plan accordingly for the last 6 weeks of school. I think that helps in your point, Mr. Hogg, about ramping this up, but also being very mindful of the fact that there's a lot of operational issues that we have to make sure we take care of, especially the last 6 weeks of school. The last 6 weeks of school, as you know, is is a little different than all other 6 weeks of school.
Yes.
And so we want to make sure we're prepared for those things. So to your point, we'll watch the numbers 7 to 10 days after spring break. These are guideposts. We will ask people for their decision, and then we will lock in numbers, and we will continue with the planning. How does all that get disrupted? If after spring break the numbers are out of control. And I'm just going to be transparent. If the numbers are out of control, then we really have to think about, we've got to think about how far do we go on this, because we don't want to add to those numbers. I hope they're not out of control after spring break, because, like I said, and I'll say it again, we have a big variable we didn't have in November. And so if those numbers are stable and going down like the trend is today, then we plan accordingly. And once you lock in your decision, we want you to come 5 days a week. We also, Mr. Hogg, because you're certainly a proponent for this, and I certainly am there with you, we will have ways for exceptions. If I'm in week 3 of the last 6 weeks of school and I need an exception, then we're going to make sure we review that. Our principals will review that. We're not trying to be absolute about it, but we need to plan accordingly so that we can plan our operations. In all fairness to our high school teachers who have not been 5 days a week with every student that's face-to-face, and we know why, because it worked. Hybrid worked for us. So I hope that helps. I hope that gives you kind of an outline of our thinking right now.
It does, and always encourage exceptions to anything. No rule is 100% absolute. There has to be, there's a reason you're the top dog and our superintendent to be able to make those decisions and come back. So let me ask Dr. Cavazos, as we go forward with that, and I think you made the comment of worried about the spike, but also you have to be transparent and say, what's our plan? And then if there's a spike, we know we have to pivot, right?
Yes.
Like, we've learned you have to pivot. You have to be able to pivot either way. And I worry we're pivoting too much on the side of super contingency plan of bad instead of pivoting to say, here's where we're thinking it's going to go, and looking at trends. And hopefully those trends are showing us where we're going. And then you can pivot back the other way. I feel like we're taking a negative pivot instead of an optimistic pivot, which, my opinion, I'm probably more, I'm probably more of a, let's go with, I think numbers are going to be good, here's where we're going to go, and then if we have to, we pivot back instead of the opposite way around. Is that? So let me ask one question, though. So as we go into that, we have some students that are really struggling online. Have we considered, because other districts have done this, of reaching out and encouraging those students, working with those parents to say, definitely come back face-to-face, encouragement. I don't think some districts have required that some students come back in person. I'm a big fan of always choice, where they can do that, but are we going to be reaching out to students that are struggling to encourage them to come back face-to-face?
Yes, we are, Mr. Hogg, but we also have face-to-face students that are struggling, and we have to be mindful of that too. So this is this environment, and I've said this before, a lot of our students are struggling whether you're face-to-face or virtual. In fact, a lot of our students that are virtual are doing well. They're not, there's a lot that are not, but a lot are. And so I think the other thing, and I think somebody made this point earlier, just because you're passing doesn't mean you're doing well. Right? And we know that because you may be passing, and what we hear from our students through surveys and input from principals and others is they'll pass, but they are not in a place emotionally where they're doing very well. And that's virtual, face-to-face, you name it, because of just the pandemic and what it's done to our society. But to your point, yes, we do want to encourage students who are struggling to come to school. But at the end of the day, we want to encourage students who are struggling to do better, and we want to help them. And you'll hear a whole discussion here in whenever we get to the next topic, you'll hear a whole discussion about our summer school intervention, where we'll talk about the things we're doing to reconnect students who have a lot of absences and things like that. So it's ongoing work. This is not a switch that we're flipping one way or the other. This is ongoing, what our teachers do every day. They reach out to students. I mean, they just continue this effort to make sure that students are engaged. And I've got to tell you, I commend our teachers at all levels, high school, elementary, junior high, because they are keeping track of students and the students that are struggling, and it's a challenging time. But they're trying their very best, and they're putting their best effort. So I think this is also a result of the pandemic. When we talk about, well, why are students struggling, they struggle in many different ways. But one thing we learned is that even if you're passing, you're still maybe struggling very severely. All that to say that we have today, if you want to come to school, you can. If you want to come face-to-face, you can. The caveat that we're talking about here is, I'm a high school student, I want to come to school, I can't go every day. And that's what we're talking about, making an adjustment, if appropriate, as early as the last 6 weeks of school.
And Dr. Cavazos, as you mentioned, I don't want to jump ahead on summer school, but it gets me into that question, and we can talk about this when we talk about the summer school. If a student is going into summer school for remediation, they're pretty much, you're being encouraged to go, here's what this does. They've struggled virtually and not performed. I think we have to consider it. And we can talk about that during the summer school
Absolutely.
portion. I don't think we have to get into that, but it's like, you know, I don't ever like the word force, but I think the face-to-face has to be where we start considering that. And then, you know, listen, I know I probably hear from more, you know, we all hear from different sides, different things all the time. I probably hear from more about mask and those problems. You know, we don't require mask in pre-K and kindergartens. It's an option, correct? And a large mart choose. It's an option. And so I do hear from parents and staff that are saying, is there a way for mental health to have opt-outs to be able to do that? Because we have medical opt-outs now that can currently occur. And so, listen, I'm not going to bark up that tree, because I do believe if the masks get more people in school, that's our goal. That is our goal. That's where we need to go. Bark that. But I do think we have to consider some options and some mask opt-outs for mental health, because there is problems and students are struggling on that. Majority, my first grader doesn't like it, but she does great with it, and we encourage her on it, and she's used to it, and she has a lot of masks. And I got in trouble because I dropped her off and didn't give her one the other day. So, but they had one at the school to give to her from that standpoint when they come. But, you know, as we, you know, you look at recess, football, volleyball, wrestling, choir, these things that happen, and they're not wearing masks in those. And I do think the choice, and we've talked about choice a couple of times here, is where we start going to that. I think my patience is not my strong suit, but I can practice patience if that's what it needs to move this ship to get us to that. And that date is coming up on the last 6 weeks, and that's what we're prepping for. Our teachers are helping prep for that. I think it gets us to the more students in school, takes away, face-to-face, takes away hopefully some of that, because the quarantine is why we chose the model that we chose. And I think it was the right decision still to this point of choosing that, because when students did go on quarantine or a teacher went on quarantine, they still sustained that. But as those numbers drastically decrease, which is what has happened and occurred, now that the CDC won't even require you to go on quarantine if you've been vaccinated or had COVID in the last, I think it's 90 days, is what they're saying. I think we have to, it helps eliminate that model, and we bring back those students from that side. And sorry, I apologize to my colleagues. I took longer than I usually like to. I try not to ramble, but I started rambling, and I had too many bullet point notes. So I encourage our staff, and I appreciate your answers, Dr. Cavazos, and as we get to that, the more communication we have to parents to say, here's where we're pivoting and here's where we're hoping to go, I think is the encouragement and right answer. And I'm always a belief, you said earlier, of exceptions. What's an exception of how do we get this? And so how do we get to some of those exceptions with the goal of more kids in the classroom, as now we've gotten over some of the achievements of where we're going. And I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from trustees? Yes, Mr. Wilbanks.
And thank you to my colleague, Mr. Hogg, for bringing up a really important topic. We know a lot of students are struggling, and for a lot of different reasons, but we know the best place for those students is in the classroom. And, kudos, because Mr. Hogg, you're right. Our focus as trustees is on student outcomes. And we are blessed now, we're very appreciative to Dr. Brown's presentation and to everyone from senior leadership on down who made the vaccination day possible, because now it gives us that flexibility. And we know that we've got both parents and students at the high school level that know their kids need to be in school 5 days a week. And I appreciate your comments, Dr. Cavazos. I think what you laid out was a prudent plan to get us there and stay flexible given what may happen after spring break. I'm sanguine, not just sanguine, I'm very optimistic that with the number of vaccinations we have, that we're not going to see the outbreak. Hope, knock on wood. And if we can do it, I know I talk to colleagues who teach in other surrounding districts, and they've proven it can be done. And currently in this environment. So again, thank you for your comments, and it's all good news.
Mr. Wilbanks. Other trustees with questions or comment? Yes, Ms. Walton.
Thank you, President Mays. Just on a couple of points I'd like to share. On the topic of encouraging students to come back, I think moving forward carefully and deliberately, as Dr. Cavazos' plan outlines, would be an encouraging factor to students and the parents to bring our kids back in. I think it would also be better if teachers are confident in the comeback plan, and it needs to be very well spelled out, and it'd be nice if they had some input on it. Masks at school, I think that's very important for parents and teachers to be more comfortable and less stressed about the transition to being back in class. And to the comment of some of the surrounding districts have made this work, yes, some have. I think some of them do not have the community spread of the COVID virus that Arlington has experienced. Smaller districts and so forth. I think that it's kind of a comparison of apples and oranges. It's not, it's not quite there, I think. We're a large urban district, and we need to remember that and make plans accordingly. So I encourage us to support Dr. Cavazos' and the staff's plan on this and how they're going about this, and go about it carefully as we move forward. I think it will be more successful if we do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Yes, Mrs. Fowler.
Thank you, President Mays. I wanted to kind of address the accountability for virtual students. I've talked to a lot of teachers that say that sometimes they've never even met one of their students, or they've seen them 1 or 2 times, and that's about it. And I spoke with the judge last night, and she was saying that Arlington, she's working with Arlington, and now they're doing, intercepting those students and talking to them and getting the parents involved and letting them know there can be fines, there can be officers knocking at their door. But she said that even when she's trying to talk to these students, they're on and off virtually, they're on their phone, they're on mute. And she said, I just cannot even imagine the stress that teachers are going through with so many students, trying to reach out to them, trying to get them to engage and do anything. So do we have a plan? Is there anything we can be doing differently to encourage students and to make them more accountable?
Great, that's a great question, Ms. Fowler. And That has been persistent work by our teachers and our principals and staff, and persistent to have that engagement, especially virtually. And so when you describe a judge and others that struggle with that, that's a real struggle. And our teachers do their very best to try to get that. But I'll tell you that that is a consistent, persistent issue. And so this is the other presentation, but I'm gonna go ahead and go to it a little bit. As long as there's this choice and that you can remain virtual and things like that, we're gonna have some struggles with that. Now, there are many cases in elementary that I visited and things like that they are engaged, and even high school in many cases. But there are some cases with no, you're right, and that the teachers have tried and tried and tried. You'll hear tonight about Operation Reconnect. That has to do not just with you haven't come to school, but you're not engaged in school. And engaged in school means not only being engaged in your work and coming to the Zoom, but doing any work and things like that. So we'll hear about that tonight as well in the following presentation. But that does continue to be a challenge, and it's a real challenge. And it's I think, a byproduct of what we're all facing in this pandemic. And that is, not normal. I said this about a year ago, and then I've said it over and over. Haven't said it in a while. But nobody was designed to have instruction this way. Teachers were not taught, trained to do virtual instruction. It was never an expectation. I don't mean just Arlington, I mean anywhere, for us to stand up virtual instruction. Students were not conditioned learning this way. It was abrupt. It was an abrupt change that continues to be abrupt, if you will. I know it feels like we've done it a long time, and we have. It feels like a long time. But it's still abrupt. It's still learning. It's still adjusting. That process doesn't happen overnight. So, I often share the story that teachers didn't go and learn about virtual instruction, and this is how you become the best virtual teacher. That's not part of the college, curriculum and things like that, because nobody thought we would be doing it full time. And so now that it is, it's been a learning process. The good news, Ms. Fowler, because I like Mr. Hogg, and I'm an optimist, right? And so the good news is that there is an end to this. There's a very real potential possibility end to this, right? Mass vaccinations and all the things we talked about, trying to adjust hybrid to not have hybrid and all that, return to some normalcy. So much so that I'm going to go into the next presentation, but there'll be a lot more information. But we're not going to do concurrent instruction in the summer. We're not going to do a teacher teaching the virtual students and the at-home students at the same time. We're not doing that in the summer. The big important part of that is why. Why are we able to disconnect those two things? We're able to disconnect them because of the volume, and we get to control how many we support virtually and not. Today it's a parent choice, right? And we're about 50-50. The other good news is we're not going to do the concurrent in the fall either. We're going to have, if at all, because this is a decision the state legislature is going to weigh in on, not just Arlington. If we're allowed to have virtual instruction, we're going to manage that in a way, if we're allowed to stand up virtual instruction based on demand and assign staff to teach that. It's not going to be 50-50, because I don't think we're going to be allowed to do that, by the way. So all that to say, Ms. Fowler, because I appreciate that, and we've reflected a lot as a team, and when I talk to teachers and others, we've reflected about the type of year we've had. And it is a struggle, and it is challenging. But the good news is that again, my optimism, we're turning the corner on all of it. And we're starting in summer school saying we're going to offer virtual and face-to-face, but we're going to have face-to-face teachers and we're going to have virtual teachers. And in the fall, if we offer any virtual courses, like English 1, or you pick the course, we're going to assign somebody to teach that and somebody to teach the face-to-face. The key is why. Why? because we're not going to be in a situation in the fall where we're going to have 50-50. Vast majority are going to be in person. And whatever slice that we're allowed to by the state to serve virtually, we're going to be able to staff that way. Today, when you have 50-50, it's not possible to do it that way, right? So that's a long answer to your question, but the good news, Ms. Fowler, is that while there's a lot of struggle with engagement and the things you described, I do see that we're turning the corner on that, and we'll be out of a lot of that mix as early as this summer. And we're going to, turn the corner on that. So that's what I can provide.
Thank you. And a fear that I have are that students are going to think, oh, all this, poor me, and we've had issues. They're going to pass me. I don't need to do anything. And my fear is students think that they're going to be moved on through the grade and the grades don't count. And I just don't think they realize the ramifications of not logging in, of not doing their work. And I just hope that somewhere along the line that's made very clear to them that if you don't engage, you don't pass. And they need to understand that.
That's correct, Ms. Fowler. The grades are issued and they get the report cards and all that. So that is clear. I do think that there is a very, very definite recovery period that is real that we're going to enter when we return to that quote-unquote normal. So, just to be clear, there's a recovery period for teachers, staff, students, parents, and it's not this, it doesn't apply to everybody and just some kids. It's going to be recovery for the vast majority of our students and staff, because we're going to enter a phase where we're going to try to return to normal, and there's going to be a lot of issues with both emotional health and otherwise catching up kids. The labor of recovery is significant. Now, we talk good news too, is I do believe that we'll get some funding to help in that effort from the federal government, so that our recovery can be something that we can invest in. But, I know we've had a lot of discussion about, different transitions and things like that. I have to be clear, I think, on there's a recovery. All this is part of a recovery, and it doesn't just go with a flip of a switch. And you know that, Ms. Fowler, you've been in this situation as well. So we have to be mindful as staff, and we have to be mindful as a community that this recovery will take some time. And we have to be, as Ms. Walton indicated earlier, we have to be mindful of the steps we take to make sure we are successful so we can actually sustain this recovery. So anyway, I do see a light at the end there. I see a turning the corner. I think we're excited about that, but we're also cautious in knowing, and we have to remind ourselves that will come a recovery period, and we've all been involved in situations that are, for lack of better words, traumatic. And we kind of think, well, I'll just bounce back from that. And it's a lot harder to bounce back from some things. So I think this recovery period is real, and it'll take us, as Mr. Hogg said, a number of years. And we have to keep on it and be mindful of it. Good news is that the recovery begins because of vaccinations. I mean, that's just a real thing, right? So that's the good news.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fowler. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Chapa.
Thank you, President Mays. This discussion's been very interesting, and Dr. Cavazos, I really appreciate the way that you have laid this out and explained it. And I know, it's not just us asking you questions tonight. You're getting lots of questions from parents, and I know that you're out in the community. You met with the council PTAs this week, got a lot of similar questions. And I know that you and Mr. Hogg are optimists, and we all like to be optimists about this situation. But no one's ever accused a lawyer of being too optimistic, and I am an attorney. So, I'm not, without dousing any cold water on anything that you've said, what I hear you saying is, as excited as we are about what you're saying is the light at the end, about turning the corner, that we still have to take it in stride, because it's easy, as fast as the numbers have dropped, it's easy to forget that just 6-8 weeks ago we were at the peak of the pandemic, And the drop has been so quick and so fast, and we've had so much success with the vaccination efforts that I think there's a big sense among us, among parents, among the community that we want to get back to the way things were as soon as we can. But I'm glad that you mentioned the unique environment we're in this recovery period, because that's a very real thing. It's not a situation where we're going to have spent over a year in this for lack of a better word, a very traumatic period of time in our nation's history that no one, that I certainly haven't encountered in my lifetime, and few of us have. And so it's unrealistic at some level to think that we're going to have students, jumping right back into it next 6 weeks, the last 6 weeks of this year, or even when we come back for next year. I think it's going to be a situation where it's, like you said, takes several years to get through, and that we're very focused on student outcomes, but one of those outcomes is student well-being. And I don't think that our students are going to be well served as bad as this pandemic has been. Our students are not going to be well served by it's when they get back to what is a semblance of normalcy on campus, that we're immediately trying to get them right where they would be as if the pandemic didn't happen, because I think that's an unrealistic expectation as well, and it's going to be a resource-intensive effort over a number of years, really, to get our students back where they need to be. And I don't think you have to look any further than the fact that we know that we have thousands of pre-K and kinder students who basically sat out this last year, and there's going to be some developmental and educational delays because of that. But in all the discussion that just happened, I think it's very clear that there's a number of variables that you have to consider, Dr. Cavazos, and I have all the confidence that you and your staff will take all of those things into consideration. You just have to look at the way that y'all have handled this pandemic. I was taking some time today and thinking back to, it was a year ago today was the last time that I was in my office, and it was the Thursday of spring break last year. And I was trying to get work done, but I couldn't get work done because I was getting calls from parents asking what we were going to do. Dr. Cavazos, I remember we spent some time on the phone that day, and when it became clear that this was going to be something that kept us out of school for who knows how long, I just remember that one of the first things you were concerned about was that we had so many students on free and reduced lunch, and what were we going to do to serve those students because of this. And it would probably, the course of this pandemic has proven this out, that there are certain students in our population who are going to be disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And that was Thursday, and on Monday morning, we were perhaps the first school district in the state to begin offering free meal service for our students, and ended up serving millions of meals by the time school resumed in September. And then we adopted, you and your staff adopted an instructional model that certainly everyone recognizes wasn't perfect, and certainly has had people who are not a fan of it, kids and parents alike, and some have done very well with it. But it was an instructional model that was designed for us to weather this storm, and that paid off in a major way in December and January at the peak of the pandemic, when we had thousands of students and staff quarantined in any given week, hundreds of students and staff going back and forth between campuses on any given day. And that instructional model, again, thinking about student outcomes, ensured continuity of services for our students and staff in the best way possible, and in a way that for a district our size would not have been possible with the virtual academy model. And so, and then we get to this point, and as soon as the rules changed on teacher priority for vaccines, you and your staff already had a plan in place, and AISD was the first district in DFW to make sure that their staff got vaccinations. And so I have all the faith that you and your staff will work through these myriad issues and come to a solution that works best for us. And I know that it's not, the sense is we should rip the Band-Aid off and move forward as fast as we can, but I'm glad that what you have outlined is a path to move forward prudently and proceed with caution, because as fast as things have changed, we just don't know what's going to happen after spring break. I think we need to be prepared for what Mr. Hogg said, to try to get students back in the classroom where we can, but also recognizing that sometimes, if we've learned nothing else during this pandemic, sometimes things don't go the way that we want them to. And so I'm glad to hear that y'all are planning for both of those possibilities. But I am, even As my non-optimistic attorney self sometimes, I'm looking very much forward to the day that we can get our students back on campus in as much of a sense of normalcy as we can.
Papa. I think the reason why we have spent so much time and each trustee was willing to give a comment, ask a question, is because we do care. And because we have been very humbly given the opportunity to govern a district who truly cares about their students. For me, when I think of the things that are being presented to us from administration, the first thing I always think about is what's the impact of that on student achievement? Or are we going to make sure that our staff and our students are safe? Will we be able to provide resources so that we can come back full circle for our teachers to be able to make sure that our students have achieved? That's the one big thing. And it doesn't matter, our mission and our focus cannot change because of a pandemic. The same way it can't change because of economic circumstances of some of our students. Talking about meals, if we decide we need to put aside some money, say 15 minutes in the beginning of a day, and feed our students, that impacts achievement, because how can you focus and learn on an empty stomach? So all this information that's brought forward, those are the measurements that I know I use and I know that my trustees use in making decisions on things that we want to approve. So just much respect once again to the education world, much respect to AISD and all the other ISDs everywhere who are trying to make sure that students continue to stay successful. So we have to be optimistic because we're talking about our students in the future. We don't have a choice. So with that being said, thank you very much, Dr. Cavazos. Thank you very much, Dr. Brown, if you're still there. Appreciate that presentation. Okay, next on our agenda are items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda. Well, first of all, is there any other discussion and action item, Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mason. There is an item there that considers motions if necessary for this topic, and we do not have any motions necessary for this topic tonight.
Thank you. Okay, items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda. Are there, yes,
Item K from the consent agenda, please.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Any other items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda? Yes, Mr. Chapa?
I'd like to withdraw consent agenda item L.
Okay. Any other items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none. Tonight, we will be considering the items that are listed on our agenda under consent items, minus item K and item L at this time. Mrs. Moss?
Thank you, President Mays, trustees, Dr. Cavazos. Tonight, our donations included in the consent items total $252,378. The total year-to-date for the current year is $759,190. And our prior year total as of March 19, 2020 was $589,307. The total for the prior year ending in 2020, in June of 2020, is $685,728. We have 5 bids for your consideration tonight and 7 purchases that are greater than the $50,000 and exempt from bid. We bring that for your consideration tonight, and administration recommends approval of those items with the exceptions of K and L.
Okay. K and L. Okay, so is there a motion to accept the consent agenda minus item K and item L? Okay. Okay. Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Wilbanks and a second by Ms. Walton. At this time, we will vote. Mr. Wilbanks.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Ms. Walton.
Holly Walton, I vote yes.
Mr. Hogg.
Bowie Hogg, I vote yes.
Mrs. Fowler.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes.
Mr. Chapa.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I vote yes. Once again, motion has passed for the consent agenda for items A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and J, and has excluded item K and L. Now we will consider the items that were withdrawn from the consent agenda. Item K, Mr. Wilbanks, you withdrew that item. Would you like to speak to it, or any other trustees?
Ms. Mage, I'd like to make a motion on that item, if I may.
Okay.
I move to authorize superintendent or his designee to negotiate a contract with RJ Construction for emergency services and equipment necessary to perform moisture mitigation of district facilities not to exceed $1,245,600.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? I'll second. Okay, a motion by Mr. Wilbanks, a second by Mrs. Fowler. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Wilbanks?
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Ms. Walton?
Polly Walton, I vote yes.
Mr. Hogg?
Bowie Hogg, I vote yes.
Mrs. Fowler?
Melody Fowler, I vote yes.
Mr. Chapa?
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Keisha Mays, I abstain for a conflict of interest. So motion has passed in the affirmative for consent agenda item K. Now, Mr. Chapa, you pulled item L. Would you like to speak to the item on the consent agenda L?
Yes, I would. Thank you, President Mays. I pulled consent agenda item L. I pulled this item. This item came before us several meetings ago. Time flies, and I don't remember when. I pulled the item then. I pulled it again. I voted against it then, and I will probably vote against it again here, just as not as a statement on this project at all, or any of the work being performed by the contractors, which this project at Crow Elementary is an integral part of our East Arlington master plan. In fact, it's the first piece of the master plan. It's a sizable expansion of Crow Elementary, many classrooms, a brand new state-of-the-art gym, an expanded cafeteria. I think it's a very worthwhile project, and this is not a statement on the project in any way. What I am making a statement on is time and again, this project has come back to us for change order requests and additional money because of a large drainage component of the project due to requests and instructions from the city of Arlington. And the city is a great partner with us. Things come up from time to time that are unforeseen, permit things come up, and we address those things, and we are a good faith partner with them. But every once in a while, there seems to be a blue moon where a project comes back again, and in this case, it appears that this project is back, and we're looking at another $100,000 almost of additional work that needs to be done on a drainage project that we, for all intents and purposes, my understanding thought was done, and that this information from the city came after bidding to require a sizable addition to this culvert. And so all told, at this point, if my math is correct, this single component of the project has now exceeded over $1.3 million for this specific component, which is more than 10% of the budgeted amount for the entire Crow Elementary project. In this circumstance, I feel like there were some things that probably, there's a misallocation of responsibility for this particular component of the project. I feel like we are in some sense subsidizing what in reality should be a component of a future city bond package. And it is something that I've paid attention to over the last several months, and I just feel like this particular part of this particular project just has not gone the way that I think it should, and so I have pulled this consent agenda item again for me to make this statement and just a reflection of my own opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. Any other questions? Okay. Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Okay, second? I'll second. Okay, motion by Mr. Hogg, a second by Mrs. Fowler. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will vote. Mr. Wilbanks?
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Ms. Walton?
Polly Walton, I vote yes.
Mr. Hogg?
Bowie Hogg, I vote yes.
Mrs. Fowler?
Melody Fowler, I vote yes.
Mr. Chapa?
Justin Chapa, I vote yes. 1.02 and 1.03 of this item, consent agenda item L. I vote no as to item 1.01.
Okay. Mrs. Mays, I vote yes. So motion passes in the affirmative. Once again, that is consent agenda item pulled, L. Okay, next on our agenda are discussion items. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. And so this is the discussion item that I was referring to, the summer school or summer 2021 instructional planning. We'll cover more information, but this is related to our previous discussion about how do we provide interventions and support for students. I just want to, I'll frame it right up front that this is summer intervention. This doesn't solve all the problems. This doesn't fix everything. This is one piece of a recovery puzzle. It's an important piece. It's an expensive one too, an investment, if you will. But we don't get into the kind of the thinking necessarily that this is going to solve everything. It's just the beginning of that big recovery. So, Dr. Wirtz, if you would take us through the presentation.
All right. Can you see it okay? Dr. Cavazos?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure you can see it. Okay. Good evening, President Mays, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos. Thank you for having me here this evening to share with you some of the plans that we've been working on to reconnect our students who have not been highly engaged like we would like them to, and also some plans that we have in place to really work on filling the gaps during the summertime. I want to first start off by thanking my team who have worked really hard on this with many of our stakeholders and school-based employees, teachers, and administrators, specifically Allison and her team, as well as Dr. Fortin. When we thought about both of these two items, what we're really trying to do is frame this in terms of this concept around gaps. And there's really two gaps that have been discussed tonight pretty prominently throughout the meeting that we want to talk about tonight. The first one is around student engagement. As Dr. Cavazos mentioned in some of his comments, we have students that are engaged by coming to school every day. And then we have students that come to school every day who are still lacking the level of engagement needed to be highly successful. And sometimes that's evident even in the progress they're making, regardless of the fact of whether they're passing or not. And then we also have students who have had excessive absences, who are not engaged, either online or in person, and who have been in some cases no-shows all year. So what we're trying to do in some of the efforts that I'm going to share with you tonight is really try to focus on how we can re-engage students who have significant or an excessive amount of absences, specifically this semester in the spring of 2021. And then also those students who have not shown up at all, that we know were registered with us, who are no-shows, and that we do not actually know where they have gone. We also want to address student performance. This is a quick screenshot of basically the percentage of students at each of the levels during the 4 6-week period, grading periods that we've completed so far, who have failed at least one course. And this is approximately about 15 to 20% higher than what we would typically see in any given school year. And so we know that there are students, even those that are coming to school, who are struggling to pass all of their classes. And so we know that in order for us to really address the learning gaps, we know these gaps exist not only just with kids that may be passing classes, but we also know specifically that there are students who are actually attending class and are failing for some reason, whether it's a lack of submitting work or in fact mastering concepts as they're moving through the curriculum. So to address some of these challenges, we have two strategies that I'm here to present with you tonight. One is called Operation Reconnect, and then the other one is our summer programs. And the first one I want to visit with about is Operation Reconnect, which will begin actually this month. Operation Reconnect is an initiative that's been developed, and it's really designed to reconnect those students who we know have been identified as being chronically absent or who we feel are being disconnected for some reason from their school environment. During this Operation Reconnect, we will be working to make contact with parents and students, and we'll leverage pretty much every method possible that we have, including typical ways like phone and email, but we will also be mailing postcards, doing home visits, and leaving them with information at their doors. So I thought I would share a little bit about what's going to consist as part of the home visit. So why do we want to do home visits? Well, the reason why we're trying to do home visits directly is because we want to connect and engage with students one-on-one. We know that we could call students, we've tried that, we can email students, but we also want to try to reconnect and reestablish the actual relationship we have with them. So we will be working to connect with these families and to share the resources that we have available for them so that they know how we intend to support their students to reconnect with school and to stay present. The team has designed a home visit toolkit, which each of the campuses will be receiving. And there are 5 components within that toolkit. There's protocol in order so that each of the staff members who are actually making a home visit understand how we would like them to conduct that visit safely. We provided a basic outline script to give a sense to staff about the type of topics and that we want them to cover while they're visiting. We also have a contact form that they will complete afterwards to let us know how the visit went. And then we also have a system that we are putting in place to collect data to see what the results of that actual visit was. And then finally, after we visit with families, we will conduct a follow-up with them through a postcard, which I will share with you. So the first one is that I want to talk about is the home visit protocol. So this is an example of the home visit protocol. On the sheet, we actually include items for the campuses that we want them to think about before they send any team members actually to the home. And if you'll notice on the example, we share a little bit about the why, who should be doing it, how to prepare, and then how to make sure that you stay in alignment with the COVID-19 best practices so that you're safe. And so we share these safety tips, including things to remember, things to avoid, what to do when you arrive, during and concluding and after the home visit to schools, just to provide some continuity to staff members on how to do it safely. We also are providing each of the staff members with a visit script. And the visit script is not intended for people to read. It's intended just to give people and our staff members an idea about how to go about facilitating the conversation when you actually get to the door. So when staff members visit families, they have these kind of tips on how to conduct the conversation, and we provided that information to our staff members in both English and in Spanish. This is an example of the home visit contact form. Once a home visit's been conducted, we are asking team members to document and summarize what their experience was when they actually conducted the visit. And then we'll be gathering this and other data, including follow-up action steps, to help us understand and measure what the impact of this initiative was on families and the number of students that we were able to reconnect with. And then finally, after April 23rd, a postcard will be mailed after to each of these families that we've identified as ones we need to reconnect with, just to remind them of some of the resources that we have available and to try to get them to reconnect and re-register and come back to school. When we go to the homes, we will be providing swag bags. And in the swag bags, there are some specific items that we'll be giving to the families that we have provided in both English and Spanish. There'll be a one-page overview of the support and resources available. We will have enrollment flyers, which will tell families specifically how they can enroll to come back to school. We also will have information for social emotional support systems, including resources in the community and at school that parents and families can connect to. We'll also be sharing with them information about parent support workshops and times of when they can connect with the parent and family engagement department to attend those workshops. And then we'll also, of course, include calendars. One is the updated hybrid calendar for the March and April of 2021 that was shared in a previous board meeting, as well as the district calendar that was adopted for next school year so they can begin to prepare as they come back in the fall. If for some reason we go to the home visit and a family is not there, we will be leaving a door hanger, and the door hanger will provide the family with notice that we came by, and also give them a number that they can reach out to contact the school. And this door hanger is going to be printed in English and in Spanish. So regardless of what language is their dominant language, they'll have access to the same information. This is a basic timeline. As you can see, it's already been initiated. We're working with the communications department to develop a blog story. And then that department is also developing targeted text message and email blasts out to the specific students that we've identified are those that we're looking to reconnect with. Between March 22nd and 29th, campuses will begin initiating phone calls. And then between March 30th and April 23rd, we will have the window for campuses to conduct their home visits. And then finally, after the April 23rd final visits, we will then mail postcards to just to follow up with those visits to each of the families. Now, that's one effort that we're working on during this semester to do what has been discussed earlier in the meeting, to reconnect families who have, like I said, excessive absenteeism or have failed to come to school altogether. But we also have programs that we've been designing in order to help to mitigate the COVID-19 slide or the learning gaps that we know that are being created because of this COVID-19 crisis that we have. And so what we've done in order to prepare for this is we've assembled several committees across the district to help us really think about what the specific summer program needs were, how can we really think outside of the box in terms of engaging students, and then what are some things that we can do to really meet all of their needs as a whole student, not just only their academic. So there are 4 goals that we work to accomplish. One was identifying what the qualifying criteria would be for students in K through 8 to participate in the summer programs, which will be focused primarily around reading language arts and reading language arts, and then and Spanish language arts, as well as mathematics. And the reason why the qualifying criteria is important for K through 8 is because in high school, which I will speak to, that criteria is primarily based on two situations. One, if a student is either recovering credit or if they're trying to accelerate their learning, and students can engage in either of those. For K through 8, typically those that are invited to summer programs qualify to attend summer based upon a learning deficiency that we're trying to fill. Our goal this year is to expand that, which I'll talk about a little bit in a future slide on the presentation, so that we have a larger net that we're casting to find more students that could engage, because as Dr. Cavazos indicated, there are students who may even be passing who really should be attending summer school, as it will be beneficial to their learning. One of the other goals that we had is to establish a marketing and communication plan so that families and students all know what their summer options are. And then we are developing a system so that we can make sure that we're communicating students' progress towards mastery throughout the summer program to both students and their families, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally, develop a summer learning plan that's professional learning specifically for the summer school staff who will be engaged in this process with us. So there were 4 subcommittees, and each subcommittee consisted of teachers and principals and central office and curriculum staff. And they focused on each of these 4 areas that I talked about, including human resources and hiring. And so I'm going to share a little bit about each one tonight. So the first one I want to discuss is the qualifying criteria and the learner experience that the students will have. And the first goal that we had was we wanted to expand the multi-tier guidelines that we typically use each year to identify students to participate in summer programming. And the reason we wanted to do that is because, as we mentioned earlier, we know that there are students who are failing or who are not mastering content that we know need to come to summer school. But we also know there are students that what we typically would call like on the bubble, students who are passing, but probably would be recommended for summer school because the level of mastery is not as strong as it could or should be. And so what we will do is we will open the application process to all students. And then we will be establishing criteria for those that really are those being defined as needing assistance because of gaps. And the learning loss that we're looking for will not be defined specifically by just a report card grade, but we will be looking at report card grades, what stage or phase a student is in the response to intervention period phase. We're also going to be looking at cumulative assessments, how they've been performing on the district assessments and their teacher assessments, how they're performing on our universal screeners. And based on the triangulation of all that data, teachers will have the opportunity to nominate their kids to participate. All students will be nominated by either a teacher or a parent. And then we will be asking teachers to conduct parent conferences with the parents of each of the students that they nominate, so that they can talk with the parents about why that nomination is happening. Encourage the parents to complete a commitment form, which basically is a commitment to send their child to the actual program. And then also we will be asking our parents to select either in person or remote, and to decide what level of program they want to participate in, either a 6-week program, which will have a continuous curriculum that goes for the entire 6 weeks, or they could choose a 3-week program. We'll be offering 3 weeks in June and 3 weeks in July. So they'll have 3 choices. We will be offering, as I mentioned earlier, remote learning or in person, and we will be identifying a campus where the remote learning teachers will be housed, specifically for K-6, 7 through 8, and also 9 through 12. Another goal that we had is we wanted to make sure that we integrated the learning experiences for the students so that they were engaged not only in academics, but also had an opportunity to really address some of their social emotional learning and their own hobbies and interests. So when a student in K through 8 comes to school, we will be working around 90 minutes on literacy, 60 minutes around mathematics, and then twice each week, students will be engaged in activities that are focused around social and emotional learning. As we've talked about many times in many of our board meetings, social emotional needs of students is almost as large as their academic needs, if not more. And so we want to make sure that that is addressed and that kids have access to that kind of assistance during the summer. And so they'll have access to that, which will also include counselors on site for students to receive services if needed. We'll also be giving students an opportunity to engage in at least one enrichment class at each day, which I will talk about in a minute. And then students who are choosing to be in remote learning rather than face-to-face will also receive some supplies such as home readers and math tools and manipulatives, so they can practice in a hands-on way, even if their parents are choosing to keep them in a virtual environment. Now, we tried to really think outside of the box when it came to enrichment rotations, because we know that we wanted summer school to be fun. It's been a difficult year for many kids. And so while we know we want to also work on their academic gaps, we want students to feel motivated to come. And so there will be opportunities for them to engage in non-TEKS-based learning that teachers will work with their classes to select based on their interests. So in K through 6, students will concurrently have experiences in technology or STEM in the library like they typically would. And that will also happen in terms of 7th and 8th grade with technology. And then in terms of the enrichment classes, we will be providing a variety of options. These are just examples that you can see there. They haven't totally been solidified because we want to provide teachers with some autonomy to integrate some of their natural hobbies and their interests into the classroom with their students. And so we will include that as part of our hiring process and discussion when we train teachers, so they can integrate that into the learning at their classroom. We also want to make sure that we reimagine what it looks like for how we can support students enrichment in the remote setting. We know if kids are going to be at home learning from in a virtual environment and engaging with teachers in a virtual environment, how can that teacher also promote some sort of enrichment so that it's fun for students? So that will also be part of our professional learning. There are a couple of approaches to the curriculum development that I want to share tonight. In grades K through 6, we will be working around 2 things. We have a program called Benchmark Booster, which I'm going to share with you, which is really focused on reading and writing in both English and Spanish. And then we also have Do the Math, which is actually a program that we use in the district at all of our Title I schools. They have a summer program that we're going to be adopting for this summer program, for this summer school session, and I'll give you some details about that. And then we'll also be supplementing these resources with other instructional materials specifically for kids that are going to be learning in the remote environment. In grades 7 through 8, we have a combination of district and teacher created materials that we'll be leveraging. These materials will include a summer year at a glance and a companion document. And I'll share an example that actually outlines for teachers not only the standards that will be taught, but also the resources that will be available for them as they design their lessons. The first one I want to mention about is the K through 6 curriculum around reading language arts, and this is the Benchmark Booster. This is a product for grades K through 6. It's for Spanish and English students, and it accommodates students in both the in-person and the remote learning environment. This program integrates culturally responsive text, social justice text, things that are actually related to the pandemic. So there's real world texts that are actually integrated into the curriculum that kids are living every day, and also includes social emotional component for students. There is a 3-week pacing guide that really focuses on high priority skills. And I'll share with you an example of that in just a moment. And there's also a focus for the primary grades, specifically on systemic phonics instruction and explicit instruction, specifically around reading and writing. There are lessons that are integrated into this program that are strategy based, and they also have both short and extended reads in for students and writing practice for grades 3 through 6. There is professional learning that will be provided throughout the program to help teachers in their implementation. This is an example of what the pacing guide will look like. One of the things we try to keep in mind is that this has been a challenging year for all people involved, including teachers. And in an effort to try to ease that burden a little bit in terms of planning, these programs also provide a daily planner for teachers, which tell them and share with them specifically lessons that they can leverage in their classrooms on each of the days that they have students. These lessons include, as I mentioned earlier, whole group instruction, small group instruction, mini lessons. It also includes opportunities for independent tasks, as well as social emotional connections. So teachers will receive access to this content. They'll also have opportunities to pre-assess students on their learning so that they don't waste time teaching a skill kids already know, and also post-assessments that will allow them to measure the mastery that students have experienced through the teaching process. In K through 6 also, we're going to be using, as I mentioned earlier, the Do the Math. This is really focused on working with struggling students and at-risk students who really need more practice. It really is centered around skills that are based on basically foundational skills that are part of mathematics. The lessons actually progress from things that are more basic to that which is more complex, and the instruction is scaffolded. So each of the kits basically focuses on a module around a different math strand. So for example, one module may be around subtraction, one about multiplication, one about geometry. Teachers will have access to a scope and sequence guide that's based on their grade level that gives them an opportunity to to leverage any of the modules based on the needs of their students and the scope and sequence that will provide them to fill gaps in on the different standards that are actually addressed throughout the school year for their grade level. This is also an example of a summer school overview. This planner is really around multiplication. That's just the sample, but you can see here the lessons are outlined for teachers, how to assess the students, including the vocabulary, the materials needed, the objectives. So a lot of the thinking and the prep that's needed in terms of lesson planning are also embedded in the Do the Math program. This is just a sample of how we're kind of calculating our enrollment. Is by no means the actual number. We will be assessing interest over the next several weeks with families to identify how many families will be participating, how many students will be nominated by their teachers, and what our enrollment may look like at each of the campuses. And then of course, we will hire and make adjustments based on that. We are pre-ordering materials based on what we believe are estimated numbers, and then we will make adjustments once we have final numbers of student enrollment. I wanted to share with you a little bit about what the costs are and how they relate to things in terms of things that we're purchasing. This slide shares with you estimated costs for each of the kits that we're purchasing for grades K through 6 and what that total volume will be in terms of dollar value. For K through 8 summer programming right now, you can see the breakdown that we're estimating in terms of costs will be a little over $8 million. Our average cost for total programming in summer programming for KA is usually around 4.7. So as you can see, we're almost about double about what the cost would typically be. And that's simply because we believe that we're planning for a higher volume of students, and we're also extending it for more days to help address the learning gaps that they've experienced throughout the last year. In grades 7 through 8, we will, with the younger grades, focus on areas of English, language arts, and mathematics. And as I mentioned earlier, the teachers will plan their lessons based on a district-provided year-at-a-glance and companion document. And the companion document will include weekly instructional overview, we'll have recommended resources and online learning supports, and then there'll also be additional supplemental resources through Imagine Math and iStation and other learning material that we'll purchase for those, especially that are in the remote environment. This is a quick example of what a year at a glance looks like. It basically shares which standards are being taught at which week. And then the companion document actually outlines specifically an overview of the content for each week, as well as all the recommended resources that a teacher has access to in order to actually plan the lessons based on the needs of their students. Another resource that we're actually in the process of investigating is the Texas Home Learning page. If you may be aware of this, the Texas Education Agency has developed a wealth of resources at texashomeLearning.org, which includes lots of lesson plans and learning resources and things that are actually free. So our team is working to extract the resources from this area that we can use to supplement our middle school curriculum, just to kind of make sure our students and our teachers have all the resources they need, and also to kind of alleviate some of that burden that the planning actually creates. And the last bit that I want to share with you is really around grades 9 through 12. We will be offering summer school at each of our high schools for both in-person and remote. It will focus around 4 areas: end of course remediation, credit recovery, first-time credit and acceleration, and also kids' opportunities to participate in dual credit. EOC remediation courses are courses that are designed for students who have either failed a STAR exam in the high school area of Algebra 1, English 1 or 2, Biology, or US History, or they've passed the assessment, but they haven't passed the class. So these remediation courses will be offered in 4 90-minute blocks, and students that attend are able to attend to either earn credit for the class or to prep for the future STAR retest that will take place in June. So they'll have about 10 instructional days to prepare before the June test. If a student is in need of earning credit for a course where they have passed the test, possibly, or if they have not passed but they're retesting, but they also still lack credit for the course, they can participate in their course session, either in session 1 or in session 2, but they can earn full credit for their course in one of those sessions. This is just a preliminary list of the credit recovery and accelerated courses. Credit recovery courses will be offered in both sessions, and these are for students who have either failed a semester or the whole year of the course, either in any of these areas: biology, algebra, any of the sciences. They are based primarily on, all of them are on core content. It's important to note that the way that credit recovery is set up in the summertime is students are basically participating in the content that mirrors the number of hours that you would normally have to acquire during the semester. So if, for example, a student fails a semester of algebra and a semester of biology, then they can come to a session, and then for 3 hours during the day, they'll work on algebra, and then they'll go to lunch. And the second half of the day, they'll work on biology. And at the end of that 3-week period, they will have earned credit for that half credit for the semester in algebra and the semester in biology. If a student, for example, failed the entire year of algebra, they could take in session 1 the first half of algebra, and when they pass that, then they can come to session 2 and take the second half of algebra. The reason why they don't do it concurrently is because the first semester builds on second semester content. And it's important to note that credit recovery is not just about earning credit. The seat time is important as the goal is to ensure that students actually master the content, because many of these courses are prerequisites to future more advanced courses, and we want to make sure that they're going to be successful. Many students come to summer school not to recover credit, but to actually accelerate their learning. Many want to complete courses in the summer and then use that as space in their schedule in high school to take other classes during the school year. So these are several of the courses that we offer that are accelerated courses during the first session that kids can participate. The dates of the programs are really go out to about 6 weeks. We have 2 sessions. One is June 7th to June 25th, and then one is July 5th to July 23rd. A student in K through 8 can attend all 6 weeks concurrently, or they could take a session 1 or a session 2. In high school, they are broken up into 2 sessions because they are course driven. This is a list of the locations and where we are housing summer school. We expanded this list from last year to try to provide greater access to the locations where kids actually live. We are sharing this as a draft only because depending on the volume of students that actually enroll, we may add sites because we're planning for these sites, but we're not restricting enrollment to prevent these sites from being expanded. One note that I do need to mention about this specific slide pertains specifically to Corey and Jones. Corey and Jones are a specialized program that have an enrichment portion of their academy, which include the fine arts and the language. Those schools probably will be pulled off of this list. Typically, those 2 schools work with each other in the summer. Last year, for example, Jones actually was housed at Corey and the kids were bused over to Corey. But we are working on a program for those 2 schools where they can engage in the academics if it's needed, and also have an enrichment opportunity for kids, which includes opportunities to practice in the fine arts and in conversational Spanish. So that's being worked on as well. Transportation and food services will be provided for students. So students that are being housed in locations other than their home campus will have opportunities will be bused to those places. And students that normally get bused to their home campus will have opportunities to receive busing to the summer program, as well as their typical meal services. One thing that's important for us is that we are working to measure the impact that summer programming has. As Dr. Cavazos mentioned, this is one of multi-years that will be working in summer programming. And so we will be leveraging our pre and post-assessment process throughout the courses to really understand how kids are actually doing so that we can make adjustments for future and as we move into the fall, and also so we can see what kind of impact the programming that we have actually had on closing some of the learning gaps. When it comes to communication, one of our goals was really to make sure that there's a strong marketing and communication plan so that families have a real deep awareness about what program options are available in the summer and what their enrollment process is, what requirements there are, and things like that. So we are going to be working with the communications department to redesign the summer programming webpage. It will include an FAQ and all the enrollment information that's needed, including when the sessions are taking place, what learning environment options there are, meaning in-person or remote, what requirements there are, and also what process they would need to actually go through in order to enroll. We'll also be scheduling virtual information sessions so that we can answer questions directly to parents and guardians if those answers are not necessarily being provided on the FAQ or in the enrollment documents. We're also going to make sure that we work with our communication departments and schools to leverage things that we typically use always, like marquees, sending out emails, using social media, and all the other venues that we can leverage to make sure that the word gets out. Finally, we will be providing staff with notice of summer programming and teaching them specifically about how to nominate students for participation. Of course, our goal is to prioritize students in the program who really are demonstrating gaps in their learning. We will be hosting virtual and in-person campus information meetings. As I mentioned earlier, we will make sure that we advertise to families so that parents at their individual campuses will also receive information and know who on their campus they can contact should they need have additional questions. We're also working with the communications department to update our graphics, to really try to showcase the summer program through marketing videos. And then we will be, of course, inviting Dr. Cavazos to share an update around summer programming that he sends out typically to our employees and families. One other thing that was really important in this process, especially since we're really focused on serving students who have experienced learning loss, is to make sure that we have a system in place to communicate with parents and students on their progress as they're progressing through the program, so that parents and students have some awareness about how they are doing when it comes to meeting their learning goals and targets. So we will be including a report of progress that outlines specifically what the standards that the students are working on in both reading, language arts, and math. And we will be working on incentivizing their attendance in the program. And if students are participating in the 6-week program, our intent is to communicate with parents or students at least bi-weekly on their progress. And if they're in the 3-week program, we will be intending to share home weekly information to parents on how they're actually doing. We do want to take some time to communicate with parents before the start of the program about what the purpose of the program is and what the goals of the program are. One of the questions we often get is how fast will students, their gaps be closed? And that's very individualized. And so what we intend to do is to work with students at the beginning of the program to identify goals and to learn how to self-monitor their own progress, so that while we're communicating with parents about their progress, students will also be armed with the right information so that they can communicate with their parents themselves about how they're doing. It's also important that we provide professional learning so that our teachers are prepared to provide the program to students. And so we've worked to identify and develop what kind of plan is needed to really enhance the capacity of our staff as they implement the model. And so we will be providing training to teachers throughout May once they're hired. And the training will include several things, including communicating with parents, really how to really continue to conduct effective remote learning, how to manage students and behaviors, especially when students are coming back into the face-to-face environment when they've been home for a long time, how to motivate and keep students motivated and what strategies they can use to do that. And then also how to effectively chunk and scaffold learning for students who might be struggling with content. We also want to make sure that we include in the training a model for how to provide students with timely feedback, how to make sure that we're checking that they're understanding and do that frequently throughout the learning process, how to track their learning and report on that progress, and also how to leverage and build really strong teacher-student relationships so that students feel engaged and motivated to attend. We're also going to make sure that technology is really understood and that the training models for teachers how to use the technology, even in the face-to-face environment, to maximize learning for students. The last area that I want to share with you is the implications on human resources in the hiring process. Our goal really is to make sure that we're identifying staff who meet all the certifications that are required to deliver the programming. So we have, as I mentioned earlier, identified summer locations and grouped campuses in order to maximize access, and we will expand that if needed based on enrollment. We will be adopting a K-4 self-contained configuration for the in-person learning. So if I'm a kindergarten teacher, that group will be self-contained. For intermediate and middle school grades, they may be departmentalized depending upon the certification of the teachers that are hired and what their typical teaching scenario may be. We are looking for a 1-to-15 teacher-student ratio, and we are going to provide teachers with some autonomy to define and design those learning enrichment experiences that I mentioned, so that those experiences really tap in not only to the natural hobbies that teachers have, but also to the things that students in their classroom actually are interested and want to know. One important component that we wanted to make sure everyone understood that was mentioned earlier this evening is that teachers will not be asked to do concurrent teaching, or in other words, will not be asked to teach students in person and simultaneously have students online that they're teaching remotely. As Dr. Cavazos mentioned earlier, that strategy was chosen for the school year for a specific reason due to volume and the challenges that we had to address in terms of students coming and going, and ensuring that students had some continuity in terms of the teachers that were providing services to them to minimize the number of gaps they were having. But in the summer months, teachers will be hired either to teach in person or they'll be hired to teach in remote environment, but they will not be straddling the fence, so to speak, and having one foot in both pools at the same time. Some of the things that we are working through is staffing. We have lots of kids that need opportunities in the summer, and we have many competing priorities. And so we are working to try to marry some of these priorities. We offer a bilingual kindergarten and first grade summer school program. This is required by statute. We offer 120 hours every year, and that leverages many of our bilingual teachers. And so we're going to try to integrate that into our programming. We'll also be looking for special education teachers that can provide services, because this program that we offer will be available to all students. And then, of course, we will work with Dr. Hill and his departments and Ms. Moss to really identify the staff that we need to ensure that transportation, food services, health services, and all those other things are provided to students. We are going to hire a limited number of counselors that will work with students directly on campus, not only to support the teachers in their delivery of their SEL content in their classroom, but really to provide services to students, even those that may need therapeutic services as they come back to school after being away. We will also be continuing to offer extended school year for special education. This is a little different than typical summer programming. ESY is a program for special education, and there are very specific qualifying criteria for ESY that are established. And that criteria basically indicates that if a student it has enough learning gaps, that there is a belief by the ARD committee that the student's regression will be so significant that they will not be able to regain ground in adequate time when they come back in the fall, that they would come to summer programming. So ESY special education students are all asked to attend based on an ARD committee's decision, and we will make space and provide that service to all those who qualify. And then, of course, as Dr. Brown has shared, we will make sure that all of our materials and disinfection practices and all the things that we would normally be required to for COVID-19 protocol will be in place. And we will follow the current guidance as we open programming in the summer. This just tells you a little bit of our hiring timeline. We will be posting our administrator, well, the administrator positions are being posted. We will start the process of identifying who those summer administrators will be. One positive thing about this that we are doing is we will be leaning into some of our leadership development work to hire our administrators. We have many administrators that are already in the ready to lead category, who are ready to have principal like experiences. And so we will be encouraging them to also apply. Once those positions are hired and administrators are hired, then we will begin hiring teachers. Teachers the teacher pool will start to be gathered at the same time we're hiring administrators, so that we can begin to hire teachers right after administrators are selected. And then we will begin summer training programs for the teachers and staff between the days of May 17th and the 28th. Summer registration for students will begin on May 3rd, and it will go through May 14th. So we will be finalizing our curricula and all of our resources, working with communications to market and communicate this out to the community and our staff, finalize our hiring, and then provide a professional learning as we get started in the summer months. So any questions I can answer for you?
For that presentation. Trustees, any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Wilbanks.
Thank you, President Mays, and thank you again, Dr. Wirtz. It was 1 year ago, I think, or almost heading on 1 year, when we had to pivot, and you came to us with the initial plan for dealing with this unprecedented event, and here we are 1 year later, and a couple of times you've come to us with impressive plans, well thought out plans, that I think are the benchmarks for our colleagues across the state. In fact, I've talked to my colleagues in other districts, and they've noticed the work that we've done and have been jealous of kind of the programs we've been able to put in place. And I think it's because of the amount of thought and knowledge that you bring to the table in putting these plans, and not only that, but executing them with fidelity. Having said that, I looked over the presentation, and it was missing the part on that was sent to us was missing the part on Operation Reconnect. I've got a number of questions on the summer school program, so I have a few questions regarding kind of staffing and kind of time and load and who's actually going to be doing that. But I'm going to let I'm sure my other colleagues, like Ms. Walton, probably has that same question. I'm going to skip over those and let my other colleagues ask those and kind of stick to the summer school. Because as Dr. C said earlier, a year later, it's pretty clear that the learning gaps are significant, and it's impacted our students. And we know from the art, I don't like to quote our commissioner, but I'll quote him. He's fond of the Argentina study, which I think is flawed, that measured students there that missed a year or more of school because of labor disputes within the education system there, and found that there was significant impact to life outcomes for those students who earned less, had less high status jobs than their cohorts from prior years, and significantly impact their life earnings and their overall life outcomes. Then that study was probably flawed a little bit and probably overstated things, but it's clear that we're dealing with what Dr. C categorizes as being the labor of recovery being significant in terms of our response to try to help these students that we know are struggling and have failed. So one of the first things that I didn't see in the presentation, I don't think you mentioned, was how many hours a day? Let's focus on the K through 6 program. How many? I like the way it's laid out, where there's enrichment and you're making it fun, but still have plenty of sections focused. Is this going to be like a typical school day for the kids, or is it going to be a half day? What are we talking about in terms of number of hours a day?
So it's a half-day program. They will have 90 minutes of math and 90 minutes of reading language arts instruction, 60 minutes of math instruction. 2 times a week, they'll engage in social emotional learning activities, and then they'll have an hour of enrichment. So it really works out to be about a half a day for the younger grades, for actually K-8.
Okay, and then you've got it staffed. I kind of did the numbers on your budget, and it was actually a 16-to-1 ratio, but you're shooting for the 15-to-1 ratio. And
right, and the number, please, the number that I gave was just an example. It's actually not the total numbers.
Yeah, but is that about where we were in our summer school programs before? About 15-to-1?
That's our goal, to get to about 15-to-1, 16-to-1. That's usually the effort, because we want to give kids more access to the teacher.
Okay. And have we, in this program, it sounds like we're using a number of tools, and it's amazing that it sounds like we're using these kind of comprehensive platforms for English language art and Spanish language arts, as well as math, that do the pre-assessments and the formative assessments as they go and work towards mastery. Do those programs, are they able to really target in on what the specific gaps on each student is and adapt the learning to those needs? Or am I?
So that's a really good question. So we're not talking about what I would call artificial intelligence or things like we would use on a screener. That's not really the design of it. Like if I was a teacher, but it does have, there are pre-assessments, right? So as the thing is, even if a student's engaged in remote learning, there's going to be a teacher attached to that student. It's not going to be you're on your own. There's going to be a teacher teaching them remotely. And what will happen is each of these modules or units have a pre-assessment. And we've done some research and studies about what the recommendation is from like the U.S. Department of Education, other places in terms of, and Council of Great City Schools did a really nice white paper on it about how do you address this COVID slide, like what's the best way to do it. And the way that they're actually discouraging districts is don't stop teaching the current standard to go back and teach something else and then have them create another hole over here. So what's happened in some cases is if you are thinking about a scope and sequence of the current school year, if we were to stop this year in a 5th grade student's math class and spend 6 weeks reteaching something that was supposed to be done in 4th grade, now they have a 5th grade gap that has to be addressed in 6th grade and never kind of stops. So the way that they're recommending is very much what we've tried to do this year, which is leverage the pre-assessment, post-assessment tool to identify what kids know and don't know about the content you're about to teach. And once I identify in the pre-assessment where your gap is, then I can look at the vertically aligned standards and figure out which ones I need to scaffold and weave into my instruction so I can fill the gap so you can do what I'm trying to teach you to do right now. And so that's what these modules and kits will also do. They will allow a teacher to say, hey, if I'm teaching you this specific standard, I can assess what you know or don't know about it. And if you have a gap there, I can look back and see what is the prior standard that you missed that I can then swing in to fill the gap so you can keep moving on what I'm teaching you. That's the way we're kind of approaching it.
That's awesome because we know from all the studies from Katrina that kind of let's stop and reteach everything that they missed last year. It just does exactly what you said, and that just-in-time interventions.
That's exactly right.
Right, that is definitely the method, and it's proven. And I had no doubt that was the option you were going to go to because all the literature points to that. And it sounds like it's the platforms that we're using to augment and organize the teachers' lesson planning, you said we've used successfully in the past. So there's a comfort level, and I assume the teachers we're hiring are from our own teacher pool, and so there'll be a comfort level with those tools and minimize the need for bringing them up to speed.
Well, Do the Math is a program that teachers are familiar with in our Title I schools. This is the summer program, so the structure is similar, but the content is different, right? Because it's intentionally designed to fill gaps that kids have. It's focused on foundation skills. Benchmark Booster is a new program. We have not used that in our system during the school year. It's new for summer. But as I showed earlier, it's intuitive. It's all mapped out for teachers, and we're providing professional learning in May before summer starts that allow teachers to know how to use the kits before they get started. And the reason we adopted that, actually working with teachers in our process, is it focuses on foundational skills. It has a systemic approach to phonics, for example, instructional reading and writing. And a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the scope and sequence and the order that you need to go in and how do you do whole group and when do you do small group, those things have been thought through already. Because we're trying to balance the burden. Teachers are tired.
Yes.
They've been working all year long. And so we're trying to find a way to make sure the system provides a quality program for kids and also recognizes that fatigue does exist.
Well, that's exactly where I was going with my line of questioning is, when I ask, are the teachers going to be familiar with this platform, is alluding to the fact that, they're exhausted and I'm worried about their own emotional health.
Sure.
But again, it sounds like you've designed a great program with the proper tools to handle all of those concerns that we might have going to a summer program. I've got a number. So you're serving. Well, one question I had was in terms of differentiation. Let's, the two primary areas are English language arts, where we know there's gaps, but most significantly, if you look at the studies that have done recently, it's the most dire predictions about the math COVID slide have turned out to be accurate, whereas there's some good news in English language arts, I assume. The slide is not as big as we anticipated, right?
Well, I think the difference is the nature in which one is very, very skill-based, meaning like there are specific things you have to know to do in math in order to scaffold up to the next more challenging, complex topic.
Right.
Whereas reading there's like this developmental kind of process in reading that it's a lot of repetition and practice, but it's not the skills that you use to learn each of those two content areas are a little different. One thing I will say about our math curriculum for the summer is the modules are focused on specific foundational skills. So if a student, for example, in second grade is struggling specifically with a component of subtraction, that is the area that the teacher will be able to address. If this class actually mastered that and they're ready to move on to the next topic, the teacher can do that too. So there are 13 modules that we have purchased for the math curriculum, which focuses on a wide range of basic, of the most high priority math skills that kids are struggling with, to shore those up so that when they move into their next course, that area can be addressed.
Yeah. Another area I was concerned with is, let's say you've got a student that maybe he's off, like my wife probably was, off the charts, English, language arts, voracious reader, who's struggling in math, and then COVID's exacerbated the challenges in math, who doesn't necessarily need interventions in EL on the English language arts. Is the program designed in such a way that a student like that could come and focus their attention on the math skills, or I assume, well, obviously there's benefit for them to get both, even though they're really struggling just one. Is there a way to be adaptive and kind of target those interventions for the ones who maybe need math more or reading skills more?
Yeah, we can definitely think about how best to do that. Right now, the way it's set up in OSU's, for example, K through 4, it'd be a self-contained teacher, so the teacher will have that same group of kids for the full half day. And if she, in her estimation, recognizes that David is really proficient in reading and he is actually above grade level and doesn't actually need reading time and needs more practice time in math, we could talk about how they can provide them that extra time because they'll still be with them. The challenge starts to get when you start departmentalizing because kids rotate through periods.
Right.
And right now it's not designed to give kids necessarily 3 hours of the same of math. But we can definitely think about that. That's a good question. I'm happy to go back to the team and talk more about that.
Yeah, and I'm giving you the softball questions now because the hard ones will come in just a sec. And when I get to those, one of the things I'm going to ask you about is how to expand this. Was there any way did you guys think about, since it is a half-day program, of maybe doing a morning session or maybe an afternoon session that maybe is a little more limited, more targeted? Did you guys give any thought to, or?
Not specifically on having kids stay all day, because we're trying to also address the fatigue scenario.
Well, what I was saying, instead of just doing one half-day session, schedule two sessions, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, to serve theoretically twice the students, but you could maybe say the afternoon session maybe be more focused and targeted, whereas the morning, anyway. I was just wondering if you considered doing two different sessions a day.
Yeah, we won't be ability grouping. That's actually not a recommended practice. So we won't be ability grouping, but we can.
Yeah, I wasn't going there. I think maybe you're misunderstanding my question. Let me try to be a little clearer. So you've got a half-day program right now, and so it's designed for the kids to show up in the morning. But just like in kindergarten or pre-K, we would do two sessions, a morning session and an afternoon session, and the students could choose to go to either one. And so for that student that I was alluding to earlier that might be okay on math, on the reading and English language arts, but maybe needs very targeted interventions on math, use your afternoon sessions to have the students come to that to do those targeted interventions on the things where where they're really struggling, where they might not be struggling in the other subject.
So I'm going to answer it in two ways. One is if there's a volume, so in terms of a morning session and afternoon session, if there's the volume of students that are coming is so large that we would need to actually offer 2 sessions with the same teacher, but 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon with different groups of kids, that's one thing to think about. To do what you're talking about, so that's really dictated by interest, right? Because we don't want to have like 3 kids in one class in the morning and 6 kids in the afternoon. When it comes to what you're describing, which is what I'm hearing you say is, a student may come in the morning and then they may go to lunch and then they stay later in the afternoon and their teacher does small group interventions specifically with them around skills that are really like targeted. We could talk about that with the team a little bit more. The assumption we're already operating under is that most of the kids that are coming already need targeted interventions in the area that they're there for, because they're being recommended, and we're providing guidance to staff based on assessment data to determine which kids this would be ideal for. So the way that it's set up, even in our pacing guides, is there's small group and targeted instruction provided for kids, even if they were in the morning session. So it's not like you get this general whole group lesson there in the morning, and we would do something special and targeted in the afternoon. The whole morning is targeted. It's designed to be that. So that's our primary focus, to provide that regardless of what session you come in. The suggestion you have does lend itself in terms of a way to serve more students should the volume increase, because that will be important. There's 2 ways to do that, right? It's either keep the locations the same but have a morning and an afternoon session, or it's to expand the locations and have more morning sessions. If I'm just being completely frank, the challenge that we're going to run into, that we're very openly talking about, is teachers. We have to hire people to teach this. And so as we talked about earlier, everyone's experiencing fatigue. We are going to try to find some ways to incentivize teachers' participation in the program. But the reality is we already know that that's going to be a little bit of a challenge for us. So I think that's also in our formula in our head that we're trying to think about, is how do we make sure we have a quality program and that we can actually staff it? Because we can design anything great, but if I don't have anybody to teach it, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, that's a resource issue that all schools are, and as I'm going to allude to in a second, it's going to become a very big problem very quickly based on what I'm anticipating. And then you also run into not just the limited resources, but you run into the law of diminishing returns in terms of being able to pull in more i.e. more customers. Right now you're at using 6,000 as the number of students for that K through, what is it, K through 8 that we're talking about here, or K through 7. That's about 20% of our student body population of that age group, or of those grades, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I think I'm running off the top of my head, but I think it's about, we have probably, there are 18,000 in high, like I would say probably around there, yeah. I'm doing the math off the top of my head, but yeah.
Yeah, in your chart that showed the number of students that failed at least one grade in those grade levels.
Right.
It's higher in junior high, but in elementary I see
where you're going. Okay, my
apologies. So that was more like 30%. So we know, but getting those people to sign up and actually come is a challenge. Just because there's 30 that need doesn't mean they're all going to jump at the chance to show up.
And also the thing, and that's a really good point, which is, the volume ideally would be a lot of students coming, because the failure rates are about 20%, 15 to 20% higher than they normally are. The important thing to keep about the failure rate too is it may even still be more than that, right? Because just because you pass a class doesn't mean you actually don't have a learning loss. And those students we still want to also invite. And then there are some kids that have, who actually didn't pass a class, but it's actually not because they don't actually understand it. They just didn't turn their work in. So
right.
We're going to try to provide some parameters to help teachers siphon through all that to figure out who the best ones are to invite.
Yeah, can you pull up, I don't know what number slide, can you pull up your budget for a second?
Yeah, hold on.
Okay, yeah, everything looked good on this. I assume your resource would be your greatest expense. It's our greatest expense in our overall budget being at 88%. But I was shocked that the energy cost was double your salary cost. This question, it's probably not fair to ask you, maybe Darla Moss. Can you tell me what our annual budget for utilities is for all our district?
That might be a question for Kelly. Because I think he worked on this estimate.
Yeah.
He did.
Actually, I've got it right here from last year. Our actual cost for utilities last year was about $12 million for 12 months for the entire school district, and we're talking about a very limited number of elementary schools here. So if I was generous in saying it was, the energy cost is going to be about $1 million a month, and we're talking 2 months here for the whole district. If we were doing every single building, that would be about $2 million. But you've got 4.1 here for a very limited number of buildings. So I'm thinking we need to go back and rethink those numbers.
Well,
They seem a little overstated.
So I have I'm sorry, I can't see. Did someone say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So we have the estimated cost specifically, like even the cost from 2019 for plant services. And the way that the cost is broken down, and keep in mind, we're running air conditioners in the summer, so the cost is much more expensive than typically. But right now, it typically for our campuses in summer programming, we spend about 2.1 million for elementary. Our junior highs are about 600,000. Our high schools are about 1.2 million. And then we have the alternative high schools costs are around 300,000. So we typically spend it for summer months around 4.1, 4.2 million. That's at least what we're budgeted for. And that was even in 2019. The number, this one changed a little bit based on the estimations we received, but the number is pretty typical even for past years.
Okay. Yeah, it just seems out of whack versus what we're already spending. And then on top of that, when you add that these buildings a lot of times during the summer are open for a number of days anyway, during the year, and our total annual electric and water cost for the whole district was just $12 million last year. It seems a lot, and I would assume if you're bringing us a budget that it would be the marginal cost, those additional costs to run this program over what we had already budgeted. And so I would kind of question that. Now, I see the benefit if we get COVID relief money and we're able to recategorize some of these expenses we're expending and given the requirements they're going to have, or the existing packages, maybe recouping the CARES Act money or the COVID relief, not to mention the one that was just signed today. I could see recategorizing those expenses that we'd already had in the budget to fall under the requirements for those acts. But I would like to.
I think Kelly Horn is on the call. He may,
there he is.
may provide some insight here. Kelly.
Good evening. Yes, I'd be happy to share some information. So we spend approximately $8 million a year on electricity, but most of that expense occurs during the warmest months of the year, which is going to be August, the end of August, September, and the first couple of weeks of October. And then we go into what we call our shoulder months and our winter months. And then we come back into the shoulder months in the spring, which those winter months we're running mostly gas. And in the shoulder months, it's the same thing. We use Mother Nature to cool our buildings where we can. And so we save a tremendous amount of energy between the second week of October all the way through generally to about the second week of April, and then the end of April and through May, we spend, again, just like in August, in September, and the 1st of October, that's where all of our electricity costs go for HVAC primarily. And then in the summertime, so my point is we spend the bulk of our electricity dollars in about 3 months of the year. And in the summertime, we go to, we shut our buildings down. We run to what we call our setback mode, where we elevate the temperatures into space. We team clean, and we only operate buildings where Dr. Wirtz has his team teaching summer school, and it's a very limited portion of the day. We try to do that to try to save as much cost as possible. But Dr. Wirtz is correct. Those numbers he's giving you represent primarily our summer school operations dollars. So it's just, you're talking about the hottest part of the month, the hottest part of the summer, or the year, I should say. And in those buildings, when they're being used like that, they're operating and running just like your home does in the summertime. They're running around the clock. So there's a lot of money tied up in summer school opportunities for electricity.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks, Mr. Horn. I can definitely see that summer, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I would like a better breakdown of that, because it just does seem out of whack. You'd think our personnel, I'd like to spend more money on personnel to teach more students than electricity, but in the end, it's really not that important. So, you know, again, let me try to start to wrap up here. It's definitely a well thought out plan. It hits all of the hot buttons for me and what I would like to see for our summer intervention plan, especially in the younger grades. But I'm reminded, you know, of Dr. Cavazos' statement that the labor of recovery is going to be significant. And he, a few years ago, when we were facing kind of storm clouds on the horizon, came to me when I was chairing financial futures and kind of challenged us to think, I think he came up with the term big, bold, and broad. And if any time dictates that we think big, meaning that we need to think bigger than just this after-school program. We need to think creatively how to reach more students and provide different tiers of intervention. And also to solve the resource issues, be creative and think big, and utilize our nonprofit partners like the YMCA and others who provide summer programs, and enlist them to help in the remediation due to what our students are facing. You know, the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, you know, Fort Worth, they use Clayton Youth Enrichment, and they can certainly provide resources to help on the SEL. They're not typically going to be your trained teachers, but if we could provide kind of canned curriculum and where they could help on some of the fun activities or help provide resources to keep kids on task as they rotate through their stations, I think that's the kind of solution that I want to see. And then kind of bold enough, you know, are we thinking outside the box in ways? We've got 73 campuses, and I'm always fond of saying those are 73 different laboratories where we can take those theories that we've always liked to try to test out, and really, you know, innovation comes from that boldness and willing to experiment to make breakthroughs in student achievement. And so I would call on you to kind of rethink, and I know this is just one small piece of the solution that we're going to provide. And so it's going to take a continuing effort. And then kind of broad is, let's solve multiple problems that we can. I mean, you know, we know getting kids into full day pre-K is a key solution that we need to work on for, and has the biggest impact, especially for our disadvantaged students, in closing those gaps that we need to close. and which will increase our accountability ratings. So I think now's the opportunity to kind of try to think broad and how we can kind of knock several things off, like closing the digital divide. And then in closing, I kind of, I know there was funding for these type of programs in the original CARES Act from last March. How much money did we apply for some of that original CARES Act money to cover some of this? I mean,
In general terms, on the funding, it was mostly technology, and it was mostly to stand up food services and things like that. Those were the reimbursed costs. The technology was significant because they did a price break, if you will, or portion that TEA paid and districts paid. So not minimizing that at all. But I think two important points. One is it's just the beginning of the funding, in terms of that funding we received. The investment that we're looking at in a draft budget is one that we do anticipate will come from federal funding, okay? Because I think, but just because we're in this session right now, that will likely be delayed until closer to May. But we're planning for that to be covered and other things. So to your point, Mr. Wilbanks, I appreciate the bold and big and
but weren't
big
those
and
your
broad.
terms? Big,
I don't
bold, and
remember.
broad?
Yeah, but no, you're right, and it was. And so in that spirit, it's important to just think again that, like we started the conversation, this is one beginning piece.
Yeah, one beginning piece of a much bigger puzzle.
We have to be mindful of staffing and all that, not staffing the cost, but staffing the fact that people are tired, and we need to make sure we give people a break as well, but also serve our students. So this will be a continued effort, and we'll have many more discussions about this type of investment in the fall, a mini semester for students, those type of things that are on the horizon, increased technology perhaps for students and things like that. Frankly, this is like the beginning of that conversation. And I think you're right, it's gonna take some big moves, bold moves, but it's also gonna take what is so precious, is the key factor to almost all of our discussions, is time.
Yeah.
It's
a multi-year solution.
That's right. And you can't
It's not
accelerate
a one-off.
the development of students and things like that to a large extent, right? You can accelerate their learning, but there's just the pacing that has to happen naturally. But to your point, I mean, this is like I said, the beginning, and there should be federal funding following this, especially now that another has passed.
Yeah, speaking of that, I mean, the original CARES Act was earmarked for K through 12, $13 billion federally, of which Texas received $1.2 billion. And of that, the final numbers I looked up on TEA yesterday, we were allocated $15 million of that. Well, then we had the funding package from December, which was $54 billion federally, of which Texas got $5.5 billion, and 4.9 realistically would be divvied up to the districts, and we still don't know. I guess we're gonna assume that's gonna pay for our hold harmless.
Yes, and more. I think
but more than that,
we should expect more than.
And there are provisions in that, again, for COVID interventions for summer school and after-school programs, and so there's 5.5, of which, if you do the same federal Title I formulation, is going to be like 4 times over the 15 million we got before. But here's the big problem we're all going to face is the president just signed the big 1.9 package, of which 126 billion was given through K through 12, and there's 20% of that is supposed to be spent on these exact same programs that we're developing. Texas is going to get 12.4 billion of that, and if you do the allocation out, we could be looking at $161 million, of which at a minimum, we have to spend 20% of that on summer school and after-school programs to for remediation of the COVID slide. So that's well over $30 million, and that's a minimum. So there's multiple buckets to help us. Money is not going to be the solution. It's going to be for us as a district to think big, bold, and broad. And for the first time, I think I'm going to be sanguine. I used my favorite word again. Despite what's happened in the past, there's going to be money, and we need to be thinking bigger, bolder, and broader. This is an excellent plan, Dr. Wirtz, but it's one step, and I'm anxious to see how we think outside the box and expand upon this. You know, this is our first stake in the ground, and then we need to view it as that and start building upon that, and keep building upon that. And I anticipate this is going to be a multi-year, you know, at least 4 years minimum, right?
Yes, and Mr. Wilbanks, you hit it right on the mark. And I think one thing to keep in mind is we're going to learn some things with summer programming that we're designing, and what students respond to, what students don't respond to, what our staff gives us feedback that this program, this curriculum worked or it didn't work as well as we thought it would. Those things it's a learning process too, and I think we need to take, to your point, the time to learn and keep growing and keep bringing different kind of interventions for our students. Last thing I'll say about the funding, because you stated some very big numbers, and they are. And I do anticipate that for Arlington, we will get funding. It is one-time funding. It may be very big, but it's still one-time funding. And you're right, it's a chance to start, you know, populating some of those ideas, but understanding that there will at some point be an end to that funding, and we have to also be mindful to those things. So just you're hitting right on the mark on these things.
Yeah, it is. The problem is going to be, you know, as Dr. Wirtz alluded to, that's a big amount of money. It's like, great, let's have summer school at every campus, but we're going to be resource constrained. Every school, everyone's going to be trying to find resources to provide these interventions, and it's everyone's going to be fighting over the same resources, and it's going to be hard to execute. But it is a multi-year, and it is funding that would allow us to do multi-year interventions and have our students not end up like that cohort of Argentina students who suffered for the rest of their life. And Mr. Hogg was right. You know, we need to be focused on student outcomes, and we will have, I anticipate, we might not get 161. The Austin might have something to say about that, but we will have a significant amount of money that will objectively be a game changer for this district. And we have proven to be innovators and come up with excellent programs, and I have no doubt that we will continue to lead in this effort as well. So again, thank you, Dr. Wirtz. And I've monopolized everyone's time. I apologize. So if anyone's still awake, they can have the floor back.
Do we have any other trustees? Yes, Mrs. Fowler? No apologies.
So Dr. Wirtz, when you were talking about doing the home visits, you know, I think we're going to find that with COVID and people losing their jobs, we're going to go to those homes and maybe the families are no longer there. And I don't know if there's a good way to try and trace and find them, but one thing that maybe you and your team can think about is maybe reaching out to some of the shelters and some of the motels that serve as shelters to see if some of the families are possibly living there, that we could reach out and try to help them, because I know there's bound to be a lot of families that have lost their homes. And then one other thing that I wanted to mention, you were talking about with the summer school that they'll have the choice of virtual or in person. And I just don't know. I mean, I know we like to give choice, but I don't know that that's a good idea for kids that have repeatedly not checked in and that have failed and have not done the work, to give them the choice of continuing in that same manner. I almost feel like those are certainly the kids that need to be there face to face. But I don't know if we can do anything about that. But I don't know that allowing them to continue on their failing path is what we need to do.
I think I understand your concern. I think the reason that we're providing both of those environments is because for two reasons. One, we cannot mandate summer programming. It is a parental choice, and it's not contingent on retention, meaning a decision to retain a child or promote a child in grades K through 8 is made prior to summer. If you're going to be retained, we've already decided that before you come to summer school. And so knowing that there are some families that are going to be uncomfortable regardless and will not send their students, we wanted to make sure that we still had access to those kids. Even if a parent refused to send them to school, we agree with you. We would love to have them face to face. That is our goal. But if there are families that are really apprehensive and their only choice is either I do remote or I'm not going to send my child to summer programming, we want to be able to provide a teacher to facilitate that process with them in some kind of synchronous way so that learning can actually take place. But we do agree with you, which is ideally we would love to see kids face to face. We just want to provide an option for families where we knew that that wasn't going to be an option for them.
No, and I do appreciate that because
Yes.
there will be families that prefer that. So I am appreciative of that. But in your the days ahead, if you will just remember to maybe try and find the families that are no longer at their addresses. And
Oh
maybe look
yeah,
at the
that's a good
shelters.
idea.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fowler. Yes, Mr. Hogg.
Just a few more questions than Mr. Wilbanks. No, I'm just kidding, Mr. Wilbanks. Dr. Wertz, thank you for that. And I agree with Ms. Fowler. Listen, I think I think you gave a really good answer. I can't really say I love the virtual side of this, but for some folks, I do think it's right there, and especially you can't mandate. When are we gonna, I think y'all addressed it, and Dr. Grassos and I are looking at each other. I think your biggest challenge is finding teachers. That is your number one challenge. We've all been talking about it, and bravo for saying they're going to teach one or the other and continue on to the year, and that's how the model we're going after to provide that relief to teachers. When are you going to notify teachers? Because I think we're paying more than normal for most summers, especially knowing that we have a need for teachers. Is that going to be sent out in the recruiting tools and
Yeah, so
shiny
that's a good
dollars
question.
of what it's going to take to recruit these teachers and not your normal summer pay? This is outside the norm.
Yeah, that's a good question, and we recognize that we are trying to identify we do want to incentivize people's participation, and pay has been part of our discussion. So we're working with the Human Resources Department to identify like what's the right dollar value. When we do post that position and we notify teachers we're recruiting them in, we'll articulate what that amount will be. I can't tell you what it is tonight specifically because it's still being finalized with HR, but we have acknowledged actually for weeks now that some incentivized pay is going to be necessary for teachers just to recruit.
Perfect, and I appreciate that, and I'm all for this. And with Mr. Wilbanks, to sum it up, we've got to do everything possible, and this is not a one-year plan. So whatever is on the table, we're willing to consider it. And so let me ask, with that being on the table, I know we're getting some preliminary budgets. Will this come back to us in May, right before, for approvals and definitely paying an increase from what's normal? How are y'all planning to bring that through on the approval process for the board? And that's probably a Dr. Cavazos thing more than
Yeah,
Dr.
so,
Wertz.
good question, Mr. Hogg. So I'll kind of unpack it a little bit. So yes, we will be paying more for summer school staff. And we have already talked about that, and that is certainly something that will be necessary. And this expenditure that we do have a summer school budget, this goes beyond that budget, so it would come more as a budget amendment or a budget change. And as we are close to the end of the year and it's not a final budget, it's really very much draft, it'll probably come at that last budget amendment time for the board. It won't come back as here's what we're going to spend. It'll be an amendment. And hopefully by that time, we will have clarity on how much federal funding.
Right.
And like we've already said, we do anticipate we'll get federal funding, but our commissioners also said it'll probably be late until they make the decision as to how much. And so all those things will converge, but during the time of year that we're in, it'll be likely with a budget amendment more than anything.
I appreciate that, and work hard recruiting. That's the
Absolutely.
key. Like everything we do in this district, our teachers and our staff are the key, so work hard recruiting. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. Any other trustees with questions and or comments? Yes, Ms. Walton.
Thank you, President Mays. Just real quickly, these are, I think, short answer questions. I am also concerned, as my colleagues, that we are going to be able to find enough teachers of the ilk that we need to make this work out. So I'm glad to hear that there's going to be some incentivized pay as part of that solution. I have one other thought, and that is, I hear repeatedly from some teachers that if they just could use a little more of their own creativity to implement lessons or to do special things, special projects, you know, with their students. I'm thinking elementary particularly, that that seems to get people going and get them kind of rejuvenated. So I don't know if there's any room in this prescription for any kind of teacher creativity, but I would encourage it. Do we know how many teachers we think we're going to need?
That's a good question. It really will be based on enrollment. The sample that I gave this evening was literally just a sample in terms of like the number of staff. So what we were kind of looking at, I'm looking at, I don't have the number right in front of me. I think we were thinking of around 400 teachers just for the K-8. But it will really be dependent on, as I said, the number of students. One of the things we're really committed to is what I'm saying, casting a broader net, expanding our qualifying criteria to try to capture more students, because we believe the learning loss is significant even for students who may be passing. And so we really are going to try to, we're trying to first pre-assess how many kids we actually think that will be. So one example of the way we're trying to do it is once we finalize what that criteria is, which the team's working on, our goal is to work with Dr. Barlow's department to apply that criteria to the data that we have to see how many kids that would yield, which will actually give us a better estimate about the exact number of teachers we may actually need. We know not every student that qualifies or the ones that we will actually recruit will say yes, but at least we'll have a minimum number of that we believe should be there. So that we should have that number better in a few weeks.
Well, I'll count on seeing that down the road a bit. And then there was just one other kind of quirky thing I didn't quite understand. On the page about locations for the summer school, how was at the secondary level, at the high school level, how were those pairings configured? It seems to be, a little different than maybe we've done in the past. I mean, I understand Bowie and Seguin, they're kind of close to each other. Newcomer Venture, yeah, that makes sense. Lamar and Sam Houston and Arlington and Martin. I just
these are the configurations we typically use. A lot of it has to do with it really depends on which campuses are closing because of like maintenance or construction, and also how large the sites are and the volume of students from each school that would actually attend. So that's kind of how we kind of work on it together. But some of these will actually could be adjusted. If the volume of the students, like I said, dictates the opening of more sites, then we're committed to actually doing it.
Okay, so it could be based on numbers. Yes, so the site list could be expanded, I believe.
Yes,
I heard you say,
that is correct.
At all levels. Okay.
That's correct.
Those were all my questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Wirtz, and your team for doing this incredible work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Any other comments or questions from trustees? Okay, seeing none. Thank you so much, Dr. Wirtz. Thank you for that presentation. Thank you for answering all of our questions, and appreciate the presentation. Okay, next on our agenda is the 2019 bond program update. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. And so this evening we bring a bond update, and this is among all the things that are happening, all the things that we've had discussions on tonight. We do have a bond that we're implementing, and so I want to, ahead of time, thank Kelly Horn and his staff and finance staff and all their schools that are receiving bond work right now. Thank you for their work, their diligence. And so this gives you an overview, just to maybe set a context of where we are in the bond, how much funding there was, what are the phases, just to recalibrate all that as we move into this bond. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Horn to take us through a bond update presentation.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. President Mays, members of the board. I'll take just a minute to get my screen shared here. Okay. Okay, I believe you can see that now. And so I'll be brief tonight with the 2019 bond program update. And I'll start by saying that currently we are wrapping up the last few projects of the 2014 bond program. And we have a very good start, obviously, on our 2019 program, as Dr. Cavazos mentioned a moment ago. So let me go ahead and move through this now. This first slide just gives you a quick overview of the 4 areas that we've compartmentalized our funding into. And you can see that those are our facilities, which makes up the largest portion of that. And then our fine arts funding, our safety, security, and technology funding, and then our transportation funding for a total of $966 million. This next sheet here just gives you an overall financial summary of where we are in the phase 1 of the bond program at this time. And so this breaks out the budgeted amount that we had for each of the year 1 funds for each of those 4 areas I mentioned a minute ago, for a total of $311 million. And then the encumbered amount that we have to date, and then what we've expended so far, and then finally what's available. And then there's a little bit of a breakdown on our bond issuance costs in the interest that we've earned to date. So the total available funds out of that first $311 million is roughly $174 million at this point. The first area I'll cover is facilities, and this really is about phase 1. Again, at the top of the sheet, you'll see that I've broken down the first 5 or all 5 phases of the bond program for the facilities dollars, and to date we've issued $283 million and change for construction costs of the first phase of projects. And then you can see the chart just kind of breaks down what we've expended, what's encumbered, and what's available. Expended to date is approximately $41 million, and that's really around a handful of projects. It's around the gun project, our food service center, and the Crow project, and our playgrounds to date. There are a number of projects that we've been planning for quite some time that are in the bidding phase, and I'll show you that here in just a moment. But the first of which, of course, that will be added this total, probably at the next update, will be the Webb project, as we've just bid the Webb Elementary School replacement project at this point. And so then a breakdown of where we are with the first 2 phases. And I say first 2 phases because we have recently sold the bond funds, or issued bond funds, pardon me, for the second phase of our program. And so we have quite a number of projects that are now entering the planning phase. Of that first phase, though, most of those projects have moved through, but right now we have a total of 25 active projects to date. This is our first phase projects that I mentioned a moment ago. The 2 that are still in design are the Martin High School addition and renovations, and then the Glassby Field modifications there at Martin High School. In bidding right now, of course, we just finished bidding Webb, and we did that very successfully. And that project, I'll bring that to the board for approval at our next meeting. And we were under budget on that project, I can tell you now. And so we're already off to a good start there. We've recognized some significantly lower construction costs that we've seen in the past. Shackelford and Jones, those projects you recently approved. And then the Thornton and Berry projects, we've begun with the demolition portion of those, bidding those pieces, and we are getting ready to bid the replacement schools at this time. And then I mentioned those projects that we have under construction right now. The gun project is moving along ahead of schedule at this point. Our Crow project is slated to open in August of this year. The Food Nutrition Service Center is in the final inspections phase right now, and we plan to have that open and operational in the next month and a half fully. And then, of course, our Enterprise Center project is moving on very well, and we expect to be substantially complete with that project at the end of May. And then our first playground replacements phase is well underway. Tomorrow we'll have our first playground, the Piercy STEM Academy playground, will be completed totally. And then following spring break, we'll have Ashworth, and then there'll be a number of other campuses that will open up over the next few weeks. Just a few photos of some of those projects I mentioned a minute ago. You can see here in the largest portion of this, the largest photo here on this page has to do with the 6th grade classroom addition. And if you drive up and down Fielder, you'll notice recently that they've begun to apply the brick. You can see the large scaffolding there along the side of the building. That project is moving very, very well. And again, like I mentioned, it's actually ahead of schedule. You see the steel there at the cafeteria. These were taken probably a month ago now. So when we initially planned to present this program, and so they're a little bit dated at this point. But then in the bottom right, you can see the new media center going in as well. So most of these areas now have the exterior applied to them. And like I said, we're making good progress with the roofing and even the brick. Then the new classroom wing at Crow. As Dr. Wertz mentioned earlier, we have in this a number of classrooms being added, as well as the new gymnasium, which will serve that campus well. If you remember, this campus had one of those small metal activity rooms. So this gym will look, and it's modeled after, I should say, the Jones model that we established a little over a year ago now. And then at the bottom right, the kitchen, the new kitchen addition. Once we expand that kitchen into that area, then we'll expand and take the old kitchen and turn that into more cafeteria space for that campus. This is the look at a recent photo when we had the winter storm. We didn't leave the door open on the freezer actually, but the freezer is complete. They actually have the shelving in the freezer now, and they'll begin the startup on that shortly. And then of course the new parking and all the new facade around the front part of the building. I walked that building today, and the renovation portion on the inside is very near complete. So again, we'll have David Lewis and his team back in this building in very short order. Here's a look at a couple of photos at the Enterprise Center, which will be the new administration building. The largest photo there on the left is the new boardroom. This, again, we mentioned this before, our current boardroom seats approximately 100 people. This one will seat almost 160 people. And then you get a look at just a few other floors there. The picture shown on the bottom right is actually a lobby off of one of the upper floors. And then you can see the third floor office area where this particular photo shows the open office area will have workstations throughout. And then I mentioned the playgrounds. This is actually a little bit dated by a couple of weeks. The Piercy STEM Academy photo there now has the rubber surface down and all the fencing is complete. They were actually putting sod down today around it, so it'll be ready tomorrow. Beavency, you can see, is kind of progressing right behind it, as is Ashworth. And then you can see some of the schools that are later in that package, like Williams, and there are a few others that are just now getting started with canopies and playground equipment being installed. But that was the plan, was to start at one and then have the crews just go from school to school and follow each other, so all the way through to completion. And then a couple of projects we brought forward that because of some issues we had at those campuses, the Johns Elementary and Ashworth Elementary schools, their patios that serve both as an art patio and then as a kindergarten play area in some cases. Those patios were in really, really bad shape. We had foundational issues on those, and so we brought those forward and completely replaced them. And you may not have seen the older photos, but I can assure you these are a great deal nicer, and they're safer, and they're ready for our kids as soon as they come back. And then I'll just run through these other phases. Here's the phase 2 projects I mentioned earlier. We've already begun the design on the playground replacements for phase 2. And then planning on the other schools is starting currently. We've just recently completed all of the contracts with the architects for those projects. Phase 3, all of these are just pending projects at this point. Bonds have not been issued for these. The probably most significant one here, of course, is Carter, and we're working right now to bring our selected architects to the board for approval here soon. And then our phase 4 projects. Again, these are pending. Again, probably one of the more significant projects here is the diaper center and the addition that we'll make at that particular campus. And then the phase 5 projects. Again, these are mostly our schools that have very little work to be done. There are newer campuses. There are also our administration buildings or auxiliary buildings. So we've always put those at the end. And so that's these particular projects there are quite a bit more of them, but they'll go quicker. What we're excited about, obviously, is our help participation. These numbers are as of the end of January, and our goal, as we all know, is to be at or above 20%. We finished just above 20% in the 2014 bond program, and we're off to a really good start in the 2019 program at approximately 26.4% help participation. And so I'll just touch on the other programs a bit. In fine arts, this particular the expenditures so far to date primarily center around uniforms and pianos and that sort of thing. They're moving along quickly to begin to spend their money for the students. And I think probably the biggest expense we've had here so far have been the expenditure for pianos. And then our safety, security, and technology funds. Of course, there's a wealth of things that this is being used for so far, but they've spent the majority of the year 1 funds already. And but this went to refresh computers. It went to take care of network improvements, radios for security, and then camera improvements, and then upgrades to the security systems in general. And then transportation, there for this first year of funding, this is what you would normally expect. It's shuttle buses, regular ed buses, our sped buses, and most notably the recent delivery of our new band trailers that we took receipt of just this week earlier. And then I'll jump now to facilities relocation for our master plan for the East Arlington plan. And so let me move into that. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of things on each of these slides and move quickly through them. So at this point, we've planned the relocation completely. We have, and I'll show you on some additional slides here in a minute, some of the things we've done. What's most important here to note is that both of the schools that we will be replacing, that's Berry and Thornton, are approximately 80% complete in design development at this point in time. So we're moving along well. We'll plan to bring the Thornton Elementary School in for bids in and around May, and then we'll do the same with the Berry in and around September of this year. The thing I'll highlight here, obviously, is that we're going to be consolidating Berry with Roark on the Roark campus. That Roark campus will be putting a large temporary building there that will have an additional 8 classrooms and some space for restrooms, indoor restrooms, so we won't have to go back and forth to the main campus, and also a dining area. And then the Thornton and the Knox buildings will be consolidated on the Knox campus. We have the benefit of some portables already on the Knox campus that we can utilize, and so we do not have to set anything additional there. We'll be moving the family literacy program out of those portables onto the Morton campus. And currently, we are updating the Morton campus, taking some space that was not being utilized and creating that family literacy space so that it can be securely utilized by parents away from the students that are in the regular school each day. Excuse me. And this slide just kind of recaps everything and touches on some next steps. We're working with the city right now on the permitting for what we're doing at ROARC with the placement of that building. We'll be renaming or relettering those campuses, the ROARC and the Knox campuses, during the summer, early part of the summer months. And we're working actively right now with the campus staffs at both campuses on their exit strategy and trying to help teachers and principals who might be relocating to other campuses in the district to plan that move. And then also the two campuses, in this case, Berry in their move to ROARC and Thornton in their move to Knox. We're trying to make that process as easy as possible for them and set up professional moves so that that'll go quickly and painlessly for them. I'll show you just a couple of photos and we'll wrap up. This kind of covers that large white block there in the bottom right of the screen. Just shows the area where we're going to put that Campus Maker modular system with the 8 additional classrooms and the restrooms and the cafeteria space. This campus, and I'll touch on this with regards to Knox, the same. They'll have covered walkways and new sidewalks to this, so the students won't be traversing to the building, in the elements. And so we'll make it, and it'll also have fencing completely around it, so that'll be a secure area, and the kids will be protected when they go to and from. At the with the Thornton and Knox consolidation at the Knox campus, we'll do the same. We'll make sure that the fencing is in place. This will be 6-foot security fence with locked gates, and we'll have again the yellow and the white just signify canopies and new sidewalk that we'll place to those portables with new ramps and so forth to get in and out of the campus. And then this is a bit hard to see, but where the red cloud is, all we really want to show you here was that we plan to relocate the family literacy here at Morton. They'll use the new playground, the new parking lot just to the side of the playgrounds for parent parking, and they'll come straight down that walkway past the K-Pod and enter into that one of the newest wings there added to Morton. And so we're going to secure that campus internally with cross-portal doors that lock the students on one side and the parents on the other side of that corridor. So they'll be able to enter as if they have their own front door. And with that, I'll open for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Horn, for that presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any trustees with questions and or comments? Okay. Mr. Horn, you did a great job of wrapping up. Once again, I just want to say thank you to our community for voting in the bond. Thank you very much for the district for making the plans, moving forward with the plans, and presenting this presentation so that the community and we all know exactly what's going on and things that are being impacted in their area and at their school. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, we're going to move on in our agenda to the next item, which is open forum for non-agenda items. Mrs. Benjamin, do we have any requesters registered to address the board regarding non-agenda items?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Thank you very much. Then we will continue to move on in our agenda next with our superintendent's report. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. And so just a sincere thank you, and I'll start with Kelly and his staff, because this is the same staff that helps us with winter storms, helps us with relocation of students, and helps us with bond and all that. So this is the same staff that works on all these projects. That being said, there are a number of people doing exceptional work, and so I'll also thank all the individual staff members who were involved with making the Vaccination Monday possible. for our staff. So think about the logistics over a very short period of time. So transportation, security, our nurses who volunteered to go and also help people who were greeting and welcoming, helping people register. And a number of staff members from administration that help all the logistics, our communication staff, so that people could sign up. Even, and I shouldn't say it like this, but when we don't even think about it, our research and accountability department who set up the survey, who set up the way people could register. And they did a lot of work to make sure that that was done seamlessly. And of course, a big thank you to our Arlington Fire Chief, Krausen, who is exceptional. And he's exceptional when nobody's paying attention, and then he's very exceptional when people are paying attention. And so we know that the fire department does an outstanding job, but when things like this, it just elevates that. And so I recall the call that we had where he made this a reality, and I know that we as a team here have been talking about that, about when is that a reality, and are we going to be able to do it quickly if it becomes a reality? And the short answer was yes. And so when he was able to put those pieces together, and we targeted March the 8th so that it would be an asynchronous day so that everybody's available, it was really a blessing. It was really a blessing. And so we're very fortunate really to be in Arlington, as you know that, but to have the partners that we have. And so a sincere thank you to them. And I hope I didn't leave anybody out, but I always thank our teachers for the work that they're doing. And Ms. Fowler, thank you for asking the question and kind of really surfacing the point that I made earlier, and I'll make it again. We are seeing the end of some of this and turning the corner to return to some normalcy that will certainly feel much better for all our staff in this district. And so appreciate again the dedication that everyone has. Thank you again to fire department and everyone involved in that initiative. It was really a blessing. So with that, Ms. Mays, again, gratitude from my perspective. And so that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cavazos. Do we have any other trustees with reports? Yes, Ms. Walton.
Thank you, President Mays. I just still am high as a kite over our new high school band trailers that were unveiled a couple of weeks ago, or I don't know, maybe just a week ago. They are beautiful. They are going to be so functional and help move instruments so much more safe, oh gosh, what's the word? Anyway, safer than they've been doing it, by putting them in Penske trucks and driving across town. I did get the comment, did we pay for these? And I thank you for the bond. Yes, the bond paid for it, and I think in the long run, I think it's going to be an economical thing because all the high schools will not be renting Penske trucks on Friday night to try to move things, and these trucks are going to be so much easier to load, and they'll take such better care of the instruments and so forth. And my favorite part was that they're designed with solar panels on the roof that run all of the lights inside the trailers, because it'll be night when they're loading those things to come home, and on the outside of the trailers as well. And then all of the hydraulics and mechanics inside are also run with batteries that are charged with solar. So we're helping the environment with these trailers also. And then I just want to say to everyone out there, please have a safe and happy spring break and come back recharged and ready to go for the last 8 or 9 weeks of school that we've got here. But everybody, please be safe. Enjoy, but be safe.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fowler. Pardon me, Ms. Walton. Any other trustees with reports? Okay, seeing none, just very briefly, I do want to say that this month is National Women's History Month. So I just want to challenge everyone to go out and make sure that you obtain some knowledge of some strong, determined women that have helped shape the U.S., the world, I also want to challenge you to say something to a woman who has been inspirational in your life, and I know that we all have them, whether it's our friends, our family, our parents. I will have my one quote. We need to reshape our own perception of how we view ourselves. We have to step up as women and take the lead. And that would be Beyonce. So, moving into the segue of leadership in women, I finally just want to send a shout out to J.B. Little, Principal Beth Ann Woodard, and the invitation from the librarian Tamara Jackson, and for Miss Conley, second grade teacher, for opening up her classroom to allow me to read How to Catch a Leprechaun. It was so much fun. I want to say thank you to the students who were so polite, who asked questions, they were attentive. It was interesting because I got to see the in-person students as well as the ones that were online, so everyone got an opportunity to participate. As much as I enjoyed it, it did remind me of how much I do miss being in the classroom with these students face to face, and it will come back very soon. So once again, just thank you for that opportunity to be able to read to Ms. Conley's class at J.B. Little. Thank you so much. That is the end of my report. Ms. Secretary, do we have any items to consider?
No, President Mays, we do not.
Okay. Well, it is 10:55, and at this time, 10:55 p.m., and at this time, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.